Hey, I noticed a lot of you guys aren't subscribed, so it's possible that you might miss some of my videos. If you're even remotely interested, then ring the bell in order to enable notifications. I upload a smaller number of longer videos, so your feed won't be spammed. Also, please like the video if you enjoy it, it really makes my day. The video you're about to watch will be split into two parts. The second is a commentary on the whole game, whereas in the first one I'll be discussing the various design choices of Sekiro and often pinning them up against the Souls trilogy. I will not be mentioning Demon Souls as I haven't had the chance to play it yet, same goes for Bloodborne, except stuff which I don't really have to play the game in order to understand, such as art direction. You don't have to be familiar with the Souls games in order to watch this video, but you will have a better time if you do. You can find many good commentary videos on all three of them. I've made one on Dark Souls 3 already, and possibly on the others if you're watching this in the future. Watch that one at least, since I'll be referencing it most. In part because I think it's most similar to Sekiro, and because it's also my favorite of the three. They are all amazing games however, so it's best to play them yourself if you can. You obviously shouldn't watch this first part of the video if you haven't played through the whole game, as I'll be showing footage from every part of it. You can listen to it however. You may still want to use the chapters to perhaps skip over the aspects of the game you'd rather make up your mind on yourself. Of course, in order to understand the video better, it's best to play the game. It is absolutely worth its price. You can also skip over to the commentary and exclusively watch the chapters discussing areas you've already been in. Sekiro is one of the best games I've ever played. If we get a good sized DLC with the quality of Dark Souls 3's The Ringed City in Sekiro, then it will easily surpass Dark Souls 3. For anyone unaware, Dark Souls 3 is in my top 3 personal favorite games of all time. Sekiro, as it stands right now, is a way more tight and consistent experience than Dark Souls 3. Yes, it does seem like a pretty short game at first, but it very much depends on how you approach it. If you enter the game with the mindset of complete as much of it as you can as long as it is reasonable, then you will likely spend just a little under what you will in Dark Souls 3, if not the same amount of time. The reason I said reasonable is because, obviously, most people won't be killing every single giant crab in Smoldering Lake. However, I kill almost everything on each of my Sekiro playthroughs, including my latest 7th one. That's in part due to the game's satisfying nature, which I will explain in great detail later, and also because of its minimalism. There is a certain beauty to it, and many gameplay advantages, one of them being the one we just mentioned. Let's call it completionist urge on each consecutive playthrough TM. From equipment, to skills, to areas, to enemies, there is close to nothing unnecessary in this game. The most major example is weapons and armor. Sekiro gives you your trusty Kusabimaru and the wolf's signature clothes, and you can't change them. This is a huge departure from the Souls games, and even Bloodborne, but I believe it allows for a more defined experience. In a Souls game, every enemy has to be fairly balanced for a light weapon, a mid-sized weapon, a heavy weapon, a super heavy weapon, different types of spells, armor, and so on. Some builds will find certain bosses great to fight, whilst others won't see anything out of the ordinary. This can leave the player wondering and confused about what kind of build they should pursue for the best first time experience. For example, I had heard lots of people praising the halberd in Dark Souls 1, so I was very happy to find it early on and went with it on my first playthrough. And I had a terrible time. I can't believe people actually praise this weapon. Maybe I'm just bad and don't know how to use it, I have no idea. I went back to try a faster weapon by the way, and it was a complete 180. It's also very annoying to me when I keep finding different, often useless weapons everywhere. I don't think we need to have 20 different skins for the same moveset with slightly different stats. It makes finding a weapon less exciting than finding a fading soul. Bloodborne's approach is something that sounds like the best of both worlds to me. A couple of dozen weapons, but they all have unique movesets, better moves within these movesets, and they actually have different variants. I sadly haven't had the chance to play Bloodborne yet as I said, so I'm not sure whether I'll find it better or not, but I'm 99.9% sure I will. On the other hand, Sekiro's approach does hinder replayability, there is no debating it. Yes, the game is extremely satisfying and there are different skills to choose, but still, you can only swing around the sword with the same moveset for so long. The game started getting a little boring at the end of my second playthrough in the Sekiro phase I just had, that was my 7th playthrough overall, whereas I can easily crank out as many playthroughs of Dark Souls 3 if I had to for a video. We also have items, Fistful of Ash, Ceramic Shard, the sugar consumables. All of these sound like the usual kind of useful items that I'm never going to actually use in any playthrough. Yet due to the difficulty of Sekiro, you need to gain the upper hand as much as you can, which is what makes them so detrimental. Although I don't necessarily think that even Sekiro could get away with having that many useless items like other games do, which is why it doesn't. The array of items is incredibly clean. When I look at my inventory, I know what everything does. It's so refreshing. You might not care about that kind of stuff, but I really do. I can't tell you the last time I played a game in which I got excited when finding pretty much anything. Then we have the skills and upgrades. We sadly don't have tons of different builds and stats, but I also kind of hate it when a game throws 100 different stats at me just for the sake of it. It also works better when it comes to the natural difficulty setting of Souls games. In Dark Souls, we can choose to not level up in order to make the game harder, but that prohibits the use of many cool weapons and spells. In Sekiro, the items which upgrade your health and your damage have no bearing on anything else. Oh, and did you know that we have an actual difficulty setting in the game, the Demon Bell? It's an object you can interact with a little after starting the game. It increases every enemy's stats and can be reversed by using an item you are given. Furthermore, you can let go of Kuru's Protective Charm, which increases the difficulty way more, but can in fact be reclaimed if you wish to lower it as well. All three of these things are, in my opinion, far better than anything that can be done in a Souls game when it comes to difficulty. But back to minimalism. Finally, we have the more subjective example of levels. Spoilers for the commentary video, I like all of them. With just 2 examples, no enemies in them are filler or unnecessary. As far as areas are concerned, every little nook and cranny serves a purpose. The game is short, but perhaps it is because all of the unnecessary content was cut before release. Sekiro, along with The Witcher 3 and Hollow Knight, is one of the cleanest games I've played so far. There isn't a single point in the game where I say to myself, I want to get to the next part. On the other hand, I would give anything for more Sekiro. Look at it like this. I would love to see areas that were perhaps cut from the game, just because I want more content, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I wish to have visited them during my first playthrough. I know it sounds weird, but I don't want lacking or filler content clogging up the main game, but rather to gain access to it after finishing the clean base game, as a kind of patch. I wouldn't want almost any zones gone from the Souls trilogy, emphasis on the almost, I'm looking at you, Tomb of Giants, but I think magically skipping through some of them in your first playthrough could kind of make the game better, even if you did eventually visit them later. That applies to each of the 3 games really. What I'm trying to say is, it's very rare that you get a long and perfectly consistent game. You will have some clutter, unless you cut it out and thus make the game shorter, which is the likely approach they took with this game, and the one I vastly prefer. The setting in Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is, to my taste, simply amazing. It's my favorite approach of crafting a world. There might be a proper term for it, but it's basically when folklore comes to life. One example is the world of The Witcher, where myths and tales become reality in their respective cultures. In Sekiro, we are thrown into the age of the Sengoku period. However, this seemingly simple world is also home to demons, dragons, giant centipedes, and many more creatures and places from Japanese mythology. While the world of Dark Souls is masterfully crafted and nothing short of beautiful, there is something more grounded in this approach Sekiro took, something more familiar and natural. The atmosphere in this game is also great. It's entirely possible that it simply clicked for me in a way that won't for others, but I think it's executed in a great fashion. I'm not a weeb, but this setting overall just appealed to me way more than most classic medieval fantasy settings. Now, everyone knows about Soulsborne's signature storytelling style. You are thrown into the world after everything has already happened, and the story has in a way come to its end. During the aftermath of a faded age, you are left to piece it all together in a very cryptic way, through item descriptions, easy to miss dialogue, or environmental storytelling. The little or no story that there is during the game is very subtle and passing. It feels almost inconsequential at times. I love this type of story. There's something so poetic, mysterious, and beautiful about it. But I also like actually experiencing a story. Being there when everything happens. Being able to see the world's powers in all of their glory, not read about them in item descriptions. This is exactly what Sekiro does. It's not a story-driven game, but the story matters a lot. Choices matter. I mean, there are different bosses to fight depending on your decisions throughout the game. Bosses someone else might have considered allies in their playthrough and couldn't even imagine fighting. When it comes to the world design, it's actually pretty good. I won't copy-paste the same criticism I levied in the Dark Souls 3 video, but in short, I don't like linearity. It makes the world feel more like a game rather than a world, which is something that can be pulled off, but I don't believe it's what FromSoft are going for with their games. Luckily, the world design in Sekiro is an improvement on Dark Souls 3 in every single way, and from what I hear from others, on Bloodborne as well. It isn't as interconnected as Dark Souls 1 of course, but at this point I'm fine with meeting FromSoft halfway there, and Sekiro does that job very well. From this little progression map I made, you can clearly see how you start off in Ashina Reservoir and get teleported to the Dilapidated Temple, which leads to Ashina Outskirts. There you can find an item that will teleport you to the Hirata Estate from the temple. You can also proceed to Ashina Castle, under which is the Ashina Reservoir that has been changed with new enemies and items. Either from there or from the castle itself, you can plunge to the abandoned dungeon, then Senpou Temple. There you can uncover a secret that leads to Sunken Valley, but only if you've already been there, the only way being back from Ashina Castle. Then from the dungeon or the valley you go to Ashina Depths and finally Fountainhead Palace. You also return to Ashina Castle somewhat in the middle of the story to find out it has changed, then it happens once again at the end, along with the outskirts as well. A new boss also appears in the dungeon after beating the one in the valley. All of these changes succeed tremendously when building the game's world. The world is also quite open. I love the idea that somebody may get lost and end up fighting the corrupted monk before they even find Genichiro. It isn't that open however. You cannot go to the Sunken Valley before rescuing Kuro. Ultimately, these are just the circumstances of the lore, seen as once you obtain the flower from the valley, Kuro gets in trouble again. So they just can't have you getting those items before rescuing him for the first time is all. Same with the Fountainhead Palace, to which you can only go after rescuing Kuro for the second time because, you guessed it, after going there he gets in trouble once again. Also, it has to do with the lore in another way, seeing as Kuro is the one that actually discovers you need to go to Sunken Valley and Fountainhead Palace in the first place. The way I see it, FromSoft obviously thought about this, and they made the world as open as they thought they could have. An odd but I think better solution would have been to simply gate the bosses off, or for some reason render the items you need to reclaim such as the Mortal Blade or the Lotus of the Palace unlootable until you need to do so. It would make the playthrough a little more disconnected, seeing as you'll be forced to backtrack a lot, and perhaps Sekiro is meant to be a one playthrough kind of thing anyway, which would thus make it suffer. I wouldn't agree though, seeing as the game is quite short. There are also many optional mini-bosses you'll miss and alternative routes or endings, so I doubt the one-off thing is the intent. Whenever discussing the level design however, there won't be much dispute. I don't think I can ask for more. When it comes to the number of areas and their size, they took a similar approach as in Dark Souls 3, but made it actually work in the ways they first failed. With Dark Souls 3, FromSoft designed a big amount of smaller areas with the likely intent of squeezing many different themes, places and, overall, more parts of a certain world in a single game. This failed in my eyes, as Dark Souls' bland and same-looking nature betrayed that, leaving many of the levels to feel the same, yet still disconnected, as, well, they are. It also made them more forgettable, since you spent almost no time in them. After playing Dark Souls 3 for the first time, I didn't really remember being in some of the areas, I just remembered playing Dark Souls. This is obviously an exception in the, you guessed it, more colorful areas. Iritil, the Ringed City, and surprisingly, Undead Settlement. Sekiro on the other hand has a smaller number of larger areas, but most of them are distinct from each other as the game is way more colorful. Actually, I would hesitate to call it that much more colorful, it's just more varying in tone. Hirata Estate isn't that much different in color than Mibu Village unless you really get down to the nitty gritty of it, but they still can't feel more different to me. The areas are also some of the most believable and realistic ones I've seen in a game. There are many ways to approach and traverse every single level, obviously thanks to the game's grappling mechanic. Because of it, lots of levels can be very vertically inclined, without using what you might call cheap tricks like the no fall damage in the Ringed City. You can literally go almost anywhere. I can't emphasize this enough, you can leap over a house or wall instead of fighting hordes of enemies. And while it's not a great choice and you probably shouldn't do that, it just makes everything so real. Lots of optional content is also squeezed into each area. You can fight the challenging spears of Ashina general mini-bosses in Ashina Castle, but you don't have to. You can skip them. They aren't placed there to hinder your progress or gate the next area. No, they're just hanging out and doing their job. And speaking of mini-bosses, we have plenty of them in every single area. I do love the entire journey of Souls games, I also have a short attention span, so I sometimes find myself saying, okay, when's the next boss coming? I don't play the Souls games for the bosses necessarily, but they are its biggest point of interest for me. In Sekiro, I never found myself saying that, rather the opposite. I barely had any time to breathe as the game kept throwing mini-bosses at me, They do reuse them a lot, like the 7 Spears of Ashina, of which we have... Wait, there's actually just 2, never mind. Jokes aside, we have 5 headless fights in the whole game, and 3 damn generals in just the first 2 areas. But I don't mind it one bit, seeing as they're so damn fun to fight. They actually feel like mini bosses. Not quite as exciting as the real ones obviously, but more interesting than almost any non-boss enemy in a Souls game. So, how about we finally get to Sekiro's combat? Sekiro is basically a very satisfying rhythm game. I'm not even being remotely sarcastic. Okay, in order to make that point, I need to explain Sekiro's entire combat system, and I'll be discussing it throughout, as I intend to do that anyway. First of all, you can obviously attack with your katana. It has one moveset and you can change it. You have a charge stab, a sprinting attack, and a dash attack. The dash attack, however, is kind of frustrating. You can't just dash and press the attack while you're dashing, it won't go off. You have to dash and either spam left click repeatedly or press it really late. Back to the moveset. It's obviously nothing special. You perform 5 different cool looking moves, then repeat. Surprisingly, it somehow doesn't get boring. Having a more defined moveset would be a risky bet if it was the only one in the game. This is the safer option in my opinion. And of course, it's still incredibly satisfying when you do land a hit that deals vitality damage, as you so rarely get to do it. Then there are the combat arts, which are special moves you can equip. You can only have one at a time. My 2 favorites are the Whirlwind and the Mortal Slash. I don't see why you can only equip one at a time though. You can switch them mid-combat, which might leave some to wonder why they didn't let us at least equip 3 like the prosthetics and bind them to different keys. Speaking of prosthetic tools, that's another way to attack. These are weapons which can be fit into your left arm and consume spirit emblems on use. You can only carry a certain amount of spirit emblems, the rest are left in your storage. There are a total of 10 prosthetic weapons you'll find throughout the game, and many upgrades for each of them. I will comment on those which stand out and give my impressions as we go along the commentary, but you might want to take a look at all of them in your spare time. It can be quite confusing at first and likely scare you off from trying them out, even if you've already beaten Sekiro. You can obviously not do that if you want to discover their uses on your own, but I'm telling you, 99% of people think that, but end up using them like 5 times throughout their whole playthrough. At first glance, there are tons and tons of versions of every tool, which sparks the question, can they all be used for second weapons, and if so, do all their upgrades expand the replayability of the game? Yes and no. On one hand, the upgrades are not different versions, but mostly that, upgrades. Yes, one is not always 100% better than the other. It might be better to opt for the version that costs half as many spirit elements but only deals 25% less damage than the other one. It's not necessarily an upgrade. However, if I choose one of them, I have no real reason to ever try out the other in a different playthrough. Also, the tours are still very situational most of the time. Yet on the other hand, most people don't use this, so if anything, you need 1 or 2 playthroughs to get comfortable in the game and then experience it anew by using the tools. The game also doesn't allow you to use the cool ones for your first playthrough, which is kind of sad. The Lazulite upgrade of the axe counters apparitions and is thus extremely useful, yet you'll get it from one of the final bosses. The Lazulite Flame Vet is similar at first, it deals more damage though doesn't inflict burn and is thus not worth in the long run. It's mostly for apparitions too. However, the Living Force skill allows you to follow up the flame attack with a sword one, which imbues the weapon with fire. But, if used with the Lazulite, the effect of Divine Confetti. I wish someone had told me this on my first playthrough. It's so awesome, but you won't get it on the first playthrough either. Continuing, you obviously have health, and if it depletes, you're dead. There is no energy, so you can attack, jump and sprint indefinitely. There is, however, posture. Posture is a bar that fills up as enemies' attacks connect with your unarmored self, or if you block. If the posture meter fills up, you stagger back and become vulnerable for a short while. The posture meter slowly goes down on its own, and you can accelerate it by entering the blocking stance, which I find odd. I would expect it to be the opposite like in Dark Souls. It makes way more sense, since you get a reward for risking everything by leaving yourself open. Enemies also have health and posture. Their posture depletes slower the lower their health is, much like you. If you deplete their health to fill up their posture, you can perform a death blow, which is an insta-kill. Well, sometimes insta, as more powerful enemies have 2 or even 3 notches, which indicates how many times you need to death blow them. If you manage to sneak behind someone or perform a badass aerial assassination move, you can start or end the fight with a death blow. Blocking prevents damage from most humanoid enemies. However, if you bring your katana in order to block at the exact moment the enemy strikes at you, you can deflect the attack. Deflecting inflicts major posture damage to the enemy and mostly just a little bit to you. Enemies will still continue their combos as usual, so it's not like Dark Souls, though it does have a bearing on some. Genichiro, for example, will not continue his long combo if you fail to deflect either of his first 2 slashes. I like that, it's gatekeeping whether you're ready to face the long combo or not. Anyway, if you deflect an entire combo or just one move if it's a single one, slashing back at the enemy will deal greater posture damage. I also love how blocking is implemented in this game. I usually hate it in Souls games, and I think most players won't enjoy Dark Souls if their build revolves around it. And sadly, a lot of times it strongly incentivizes players to do so, as the game becomes significantly easier. In Sekiro, however, blocking is close to useless. It will literally take you minutes to kill an enemy if you block an attack when you see an opening. It's even impossible with some, as they can either break your guard with half of a combo and finish you off with the rest, or actually hit you to the block like Headless does. However, blocking allows you to observe attack patterns safely, and thus makes almost every enemy reasonable to beat on the first try. If you watched my Dark Souls 3 video, you know that I actually don't mind non-first try beatable enemies, but I also think it's a personal preference. So it's a great improvement, since the problem is extinguished altogether. Now, I do in fact like non-first try beatable enemies in Dark Souls, but it's because they allow for movesets that are harder to pin down is all. It's not just for the sake of it. And Sekiro has that too. You can just block and observe the hard movesets instead of having to die 20 times when you try rolling them and get it wrong like in Souls. In Sekiro, some will try deflecting on the first try and die too, but you don't have to. You can obviously block in Dark Souls as well, but not everybody will respect for it. In Sekiro, you have it by default. I also love that you don't have to wait for enemies who cower forever while blocking, unlike in Dark Souls, where they sometimes just stand there forever. In Sekiro, if you hit them, they almost always hit back immediately, which is great. This not being the case would actually be an advantage in Sekiro rather than a disadvantage like in Dark Souls, since hitting a blocking opponent inflicts posture damage on them. Enemies also have perilous attacks. They are special abilities that cannot be blocked and are indicated with a menacing red kanji and a very audible sound. You are meant to respond to all of them with a special move of your own. If they do a sweep attack, you need to leap and then jump on their head. Thrust attacks you can deflect, but also use the skill Mikiri counter for even more posture damage. No grab attacks except the snake eyes can be deflected and you are meant to run away from them. The final and more unique one is the rare lightning attack. You have to jump and get struck by lightning while still airborne, then attack once falling in order to send the attack back, dealing massive health and posture damage. So now we can discuss the rhythm game, which you can likely understand on your own now that I've explained it, but this is basically it. Take Guitar Hero as an example. You have to press the button at the correct time, which is indicated by the moment the gems hit the target. In Sekiro, that same wind-up is replaced with an attack, and you need to press the button at the end, the moment it connects with your body. Furthermore, you have 5 different colors in Guitar Hero, which means 5 different buttons. And in Sekiro, you have 5 different responses to the varying attacks. Deflect for normal, Mikiri for thrust, jump for sweep, jump and deflect for lightning, and dash away for grab. This is great in my opinion, because I love rhythm games, yet have never been able to really get into one, since they're not as substantial. I can't just play a rhythm game for a long period of time. That problem might be coming from me, but I still love Sekiro for extinguishing it altogether. Exploration, lore, stealth. Sekiro isn't just a rhythm game. It's a rhythm game within a game, and it's why it works so well. But how hard is this rhythm game? An ultimate question when it comes to any FromSoft title. Well, as it turns out, it's not really that hard to get through by using any means necessary. Surprisingly, you can complete most of the game by spamming deflect with a few modifications here and there. That's excluding Headless and Demon of Hatred obviously. Most people will be spamming right click continuously before they get the infamous Sekiro click moment. It undoubtedly exists in all Souls games, but it's even more detrimental and prevalent in Sekiro. Almost everyone will go through the same journey. At first, you panic and spam right click, hoping to deflect about half of the hits. This can work on easier enemies, but it can't really get you to the game. Then you begin gauging when attacks are going to land and deflecting at the right time, but still kind of spamming if you see the enemy flinch or if you can't gauge the next attack. It's a bad trap to fall into, but sadly something that can get you through most of the game, so an easy one to get caught in as well. Spamming right click is actually programmed to decrease the deflect timing's length, or in other words, if you don't spam it and just try to deflect at the right time, you don't need to be as precise. The panic spamming can still be so incredibly hard to let go of, especially in such a stressful and difficult game where it becomes somewhat of an instinct. I still do it sometimes, and that's coming from 7th Sekiro playthrough guy over here. And finally, everything will suddenly click as you devise the universal strategy for most of Sekiro's enemies. Always hold down the block button if you are undeflecting, as your posture goes down faster and an attack might come out of nowhere that you weren't ready to deflect. If an attack does come, let go of the block button and try to deflect it, doing so until the enemy ends their combo and then slashing back until they deflect and strike back at you, rinse and repeat. If your posture gets high, wait it out while in the defensive stance, or take a risk and try to break it with the ending attack of an enemy's combo. If they are vulnerable to a certain prosthetic, spam it as often as you can in place of your normal attacks. That's basically the entirety of it. All of this attacking, blocking and deflecting comes together and becomes an incredibly engaging, stressful and beautiful dance, which is so much more fun than any spamming on cheese tactic. When it comes to the beastly enemies, the only change is what you might call poise. They cannot be staggered, but they don't block either, so you have to deflect until you get an opening and only then strike back. These are obviously still some loose definitions. We will be looking deeper into almost every enemy in the commentary part. What I'm trying to say is, Sekiro is not that hard to beat. Mastering it on the other hand, reaching that click moment, will be a grueling journey, whether it takes you almost no time like some, or tons of practice like me. Once you do master it, the game becomes only a tiny bit easier than before, but ultimately more satisfying and actually fun. Now, Sekiro is a From Software game, so it's inevitable that we also discuss death. Death here is very different from the previous games. Upon dying in the Soulsborne series, you lose your needed for leveling resources and can then reclaim them from your corpse. If you die again before doing so, they are lost forever. In Sekiro on the other hand, you have money and XP. Once filling up the XP bar to 100%, you gain 1 level. If you happen to die on your journey, you lose half of your money and half of your XP bar. You cannot go under 0%, thus it's impossible to lose a level you've already gained. Think of it like reaching a checkpoint. You still cannot reclaim the lost XP or the money either. When it comes to gold, however, you can buy sacks which are 10% more expensive than the gold they grant you once you consume them. Although there is a mechanic called Unseen Aid, which can trigger upon death and prevent the loss of resources. The chance gets gradually lower the more you die, and the characters providing you with this Unseen Aid are befallen by a disease called Dragon Rot. You can reverse Dragon Rot with certain items. Otherwise, once your resources are lost, they are lost for good. It sounds absolutely terrible in a From Software game, but I find it to be a great approach. In Soulsborne, stats can be increased by using souls or blood echoes. In Sekiro, it's done with prayer beads for health and posture or memories for damage. You cannot lose either of these items. XP on the other hand doesn't really have an equivalent in the Soulsborne games. With it you unlock important skills from several talent trees. It's basically what they are, a mixture of passive and active skills. Some of them cost more levels than others, thus arises the concern of what if players are anxious of losing levels, so they decide to get cheaper, more quality life skills instead of saving up for the big ones. This is likely why they went with this instead of the usual Soulsborne approach. Speaking of quality of life, at the Sculptor's Idols, which are basically the bonfires of Sekiro, you don't have to rest and thus make the enemies respawn in order to level up. This is huge. No, really. Dark Souls 1 had a similar approach, but you can't travel in between bonfires in that game. So if you wanted to use a bonfire as an actual checkpoint, you had to rest on it so you can respawn there, and therefore have everything else respawn, which is very annoying. Dark Souls 3 could have simply left it the same and also added the fast travel option like they did, but no, they also make you automatically rest when you sit down at the bonfire, so you can't attune spells without respawning everything either. Luckily, Sekiro gets it right, much like Dark Souls 2, where it works the exact same. Something that's completely foreign to Souls is reviving. In Sekiro you die twice, which means you also don't get to have your health bar reach the middle of the screen. Dying in Sekiro is undoubtedly way easier than any Souls game, and also more detrimental pertaining to level and money as we discussed. Surprisingly, I have almost nothing to say about the revive. It's a cool concept, but I don't think it's that interesting. Quite sad, since it's really the game's thing. I guess it works very well with the stealth mechanics, since you can revive and run out if you happen to realize that the enemies are too many. And finally, concerning bugs in the PC version. Like I said, I played Sekiro 4 times on a release, which amounted to 60 hours of gameplay, Excluding some types of builds I still haven't done like the martial arts skill tree, I've seen almost everything in the game. I played it 4 times so I could get each ending and beat every boss on release, and the only issue I had was getting thrown at walls by some grab attacks, then clipping into the wall and getting stuck. It's really annoying, and it actually still happens in the game today with the Guardian Ape and the second Chained Ogre and probably more enemies, I imagine. I mostly went about the on-release playthroughs in the way I would expect most people to. I didn't try to intentionally break the game. Obviously, there are more bugs in Sekiro, but they were very rare in my experience. It's about time we got to the commentary. For the sake of it, I will be narrating a playthrough in which I pursue all of the endings at once, except what you might call the bad one, on which I'll comment separately. When it comes to the other 3, they all offer different content. You can obviously choose only one at the very end. However, it is possible to pursue all of them at the same time and thus see all of the different bosses, secrets and so on. It might seem disjointed at times, but it's the fastest way to comment on everything that can happen in the game. Finally, some bosses in Sekiro can be heavily cheesed, and most of them at least mildly so. I'll always mention if I do that or anything unorthodox to beat an enemy. Sekiro starts off with a cutscene reminiscent of Dark Souls 1, in which you, the shinobi wolf, are tossed a letter by a mysterious woman. It reads that you ought to reach the Moonville Tower, where your destiny awaits. Thus starts off what is basically the non-combat gameplay tutorial of Sekiro. You learn to shimmy along walls, peek at corners, crouch to hide in bushes and move under floors. You're also taught that open dialogue can sometimes be listened to for cool story context, but more importantly, you can eavesdrop on important secret conversations, which usually provide very valuable information related to your hardship soon to come. Then you learn to ledge hang before finally arriving at the tower. Your master Kuro gives you your sword and a healing gourd, basically an Estus flask, then sends you off on a mission for the secret passage. Here you also have the option to return Kuro's protective charm, which will in turn increase the difficulty. I love how Kuro tells you that it's best to hold on to it if you don't wish to suffer greatly, literally telling you, the player, to think about what you're doing. I also like that we start off with a single healing gourd which heals for like a little over the weakest possible attack. This will force you to use pellets, of which we have a very small number early on. It reminds me of Dark Souls 2, where we also start with 1 Estus and have to use the limited life gems. It was one of my favorite things about the early game, as it made fighting the first area's otherwise easy enemies very challenging. I'm glad it's back in Sekiro, but I also think that the pellets are too often found in the later stages of the game, whereas in Dark Souls 2 they always remain as that last resort healing item. Afterwards proceeds the combo tutorial, as you learn to sneak kill, deflect, block, attack and deathblow. Weirdly enough, you aren't taught aerial deathblows. The game doesn't even push you to possibly try it by placing an enemy near an edge. You can do it if you already know about it, but most new players won't even think about that. Still, you'll discover it soon enough anyway. You then face an ordinary enemy with inflated stats in the form of a mini-boss, and so learn that they require multiple death blows. It's also your first fight, which takes more than 2 seconds, showcasing Sekiro's famous sword dance of sorts. Some more parkour leads you to your final destination. But firstly, a minor plot problem with this tutorial. Wolf is a deadly shinobi, yet they haven't thought of restraining him at all. He's completely lost his will to live, they say, and yet it's because of losing Kuro, who they all know is like 1 minute away. Anyway, at the end of the passage you meet Lord Genichiro. I love the attention to detail here, as Wolf, the supposed master shinobi, fumbles when taking out his sword since he's out of practice. So, you sucking at the game early on is canon to the story. Continuing, Genichiro is quite shit! Yup, it's one of those bosses. You aren't supposed to actually beat him. Of course, if you somehow manage to, he still cuts off your arm and Kuro gets taken away anyway. An old man then carries you out of there, saving your life in the process. He also replaces your arm with a shinobi prosthetic, into which he can fit the tools you'll find scattered around the world. He tells you that Kuro's been taken to Ashina Castle and that you best be on your way. This is the Dilapidated Temple. Dilapidated Temple? Which is officially my favorite thing to say. Sadly, it isn't anything special. It's no Firelink Shrine from Dark Souls 1 when it comes to world interconnectivity, but at least it leads to the main world in some way, unlike Dark Souls 3. Yet it's also not as beautiful as Majula from Dark Souls 2. You then find your first bonfire, or a sculptor's idol. You also meet a balding man who demands you face him in battle. Hanbei the Undying will help you learn, hone, or test any and every combat mechanic in the game, and he's a great addition. Next to him is the offering box, where items you might have missed and thus become unavailable will appear for purchase. There is only one way in which to go from here, and it takes you to the Ashina Outskirts by way of your new badass grapple. There is a useless idol 20 seconds later. You quickly find out just how dense and beautifully layered these levels are. Many ways and paths to approach traversing the area. You can go in killing everyone from 2 different paths, you can sneak by patiently and assassinate almost everyone, or even sneak by with minimal conflict. Obviously you shouldn't do that all the time, but it is possible if you're low on HP and near death. You then find another idol after fighting some dogs. They are infinitely better than the ones in Dark Souls 3, though that isn't really much to brag about. The first shinobi tool, the shuriken, can be picked up from this hidden corpse in the dark. The item shines brightly, contrasting with the dim room, so it's unlikely that anyone will miss it. But I think it instills a very important mindset for Sekiro, and it's that you will miss important stuff if you aren't careful. It's entirely possible that you could have not looked left and thus missed it. These tools are vital for some fights, and you won't simply run across them, it's on you to find them. This tool is mostly a quality of life kind of thing. It can be used for picking off weak enemies such as dogs, luring foes towards you, interrupting those trying to clear their posture, and bringing airborne ones to the ground. Or my personal favorite, the skill Chasing Slice, which allows you to dash and slash forward in a heartbeat after throwing a shuriken. It's the safest way to approach stagnant enemies, as they'll have no time to attack you as opposed to simply walking up to them, which can be kinda risky. The update that stands out is Send Throw, which consumes money in order to deal massive damage at times. This is more of a fun New Game Plus feature rather than something you'll be using on a first playthrough, but I still like it, since it's more of a meme tool anyway. Continuing, you then face your first proper mini-boss, General Naomori Kawarada. He's also the first remotely challenging enemy in the game, and you'll likely die a couple of times on him. He has longer combos, a perilous sweep, a grab attack, and obviously higher stats. He is completely optional, however, like most mini-bosses, but once you realize that they are what drop prayer beads, the only way to increase your health and posture, they become just as vital as real bosses. This one in particular also drops a gourd seed, which increases your healing gourd. He is the only one that actually does so, and it's likely to further incentivize you to kill mini-bosses, but still not force you to, which I love. After that, you hear the enemy mention Gyobu the Demon, before you promptly slaughter them. I expected this Taro here to be the usual all bark no bite souls enemy, but they're actually just as dangerous as they look. You will kill them eventually, but dying is more common than not at first. The little section of the level here also teaches you that you cannot simply fight in the open. Sekiro is just as much about skill as it is about strategy and observing your surroundings. After all, any skill is useless when you get spotted by 5 enemies. Even if you break someone's posture, you likely won't deathblow them. Luckily, you can run out and they quickly forget about you like most stealth games. Once you get their numbers down to 3, the fight becomes much more fair, especially because some of the enemies stay back while you're fighting their comrades, which is intended, I think. You also find how fun ambushing groups of enemies can be, especially if a low IQ one is among them, since they don't immediately spot you and you can carefully circle around them. Also, what is wrong with this straw hat samurai here? They never attack you, so you just have to do this. It's super weird. You then meet an old lady who mistakes you for her son and gives you a bell to offer to Buddha. Sadly, her actual son lies dying next to her house. Some crazy guy shoots at you with a cannon as you make your way to the next idol. You come across Anayama the peddler, who claims he met you some time back during the raid of Hirata Estate. You can choose to buy information twice for a small sum. The first is some context for the supposed event, and the second informs you of some kind of flaming shinobi tool the thieves had some fun with that night. The merchant then uses your investment to start a business, and will sell you a variety of goods for the rest of the game. He also wishes you to tell him what the samurai want when it comes to goods if you manage to find out. We also have the Crow Memorial close by, another merchant that I never come back to after buying the Firecrackers prosthetic, because he's so convoluted to get to. Speaking of firecrackers, they are my favorite and IMHO most OP tool in the game. You can perma-stun any non-beast enemy in the game and stun every beast on a 15-second delay, though usually for more posture damage. It almost feels like cheating at times. Continuing, you eavesdrop on the soldiers who mentioned that the ogre chained next to them is afraid of fire. I don't need tips like that. You obviously say before murdering them, after which you probably get murdered half a dozen times by the ogre. The chained ogre is easily the most infamous enemy in the whole game, and for good reason. You can deflect some of his attacks, but lots of them are perilous grabs, so the optimal strategy is to dodge and hit twice until he's dead. He is very different than anything you've encountered so far. On top of that, his attacks are actually hard to dodge sometimes, even if you're fighting him for God knows which time now. The quicker grab in particular is terrifying, and the jump grab, which I'm convinced is bullshit, since he sometimes does it until he manages to grab you, like 5 times in a row, come on. Also, he has unbelievably high damage, every single attack of his leaves you with but a sliver of health left. I actually like this fight. It's incredibly stressful when he is running at you and you know you have to literally be in grab range in order for him to do anything, but you don't want to be there. It's really one of the most iconic fights in the whole game for me. Afterwards, you get to have some fun clearing out these soldiers, until you realize there's another mini-boss, another general, Tenzen Yamauchi. Now I know why the game picked up on difficulty for me here. This guy is actually hard too, like really, he has high HP and posture and high damage. He cancels his attacks into kicks, and even if he doesn't, they're still unpredictable as hell. Near him is a temple with a posting. It reads, "Turn back if you value your life, you can't behead the headless, our swords and pikes did nothing." Obviously, you ignore it and make way for the cave in the distance. This is a genuinely terrifying moment for me. It's so perfectly set up and I love the quietness. Sadly, you can't fight Headless yet, since you have to have a specific antidote item to cure terror. More importantly, behind him is a shortcut to the Demon Bell, which can be run to increase difficulty and better the loot. This placement is simply put amazing. Right behind a terrifying and powerful enemy which most new players won't be comfortable running around, thus not fighting the bell they shouldn't ring anyway. On the contrary, new players who've read about it have an early and surprisingly safe shortcut to it. Going back, you find an idol from which you make your way down a snowy ravine. The little stealth section with the serpent here is great. I remember it being super stressful the first time, since you don't know what it's going to do next. Should I go now or wait until it looks down a little more? But what if this is my best chance and it finds me if I wait? You then run up as the snake's terrifying hisses echo behind you and find another idol. This might be seen as nitpicky, but I find it very unlikely that, in all that noise, not a single one of these soldiers raised an eyebrow and decided to check it out. I would have loved it if you could see them making their way to the edge, eavesdrop on some conversation and take the opportunity to run past. You do get to eavesdrop on this sad scene where a soldier has lost his horse. You can take the opportunity to run past as well, or... Then you manage to get into an arena in the most unlikely way possible. It really pushes the idea of Sekiro's level design. What I like about Gyobo Oniwa is that he doesn't really feel like a tutorial boss. He's a proper boss fight that just happens to be in the beginning of the game. It reminds me of Yurek's Gundyr from Dark Souls 3. Although I only died on him about 3 times, Gyobo is still fairly challenging. I really like his combos, especially the triple hit. Excluding that one though, it's a shame they literally don't connect sometimes. It makes the fight feel very disoriented and ruins the flow greatly. The camera can also get weird with him at times. I don't really have much else to say about him. He's pretty good. He drops an item that unlocks prosthetic upgrades and a memory which increases damage like any other boss. I love the detail with his horse pushing you away as you kill him. You might think I'm reading too much into it and overanalyzing things, but I believe this area tries to instill an idea in you. The idea that not all the soldiers you're fighting are bad people, they're just doing their job. First of all, these are the war-torn Ashina Outskirts, so there are bound to be corpses lying around in places. Corpses of soldiers brutally murdered in the same fashion that you kill. We also have the dying Inosuke and his senile mother, the crying soldier and his dead horse, the grieving horse and dead Gyobo. Concerning the other stuff, this area does look a little blander, but it's the first one, so I believe it gets a pass. When it comes to gameplay, it's nothing short of amazing. Fighting the ogre in the second general, fighting Headless, hiding from the serpent, all of these moments are for one reason or another burned into my retina. Normal enemies are also tons of fun to fight here and play around with while in stealth. All in all, Ashina Outskirts is a fitting beginning to Sekiro. After conquering your first boss and returning to the temple to unlock prosthetic upgrades, the sculptor reminds you of the special Buddha statue and the bell charm that old lady gave you. After praying, you get transported inside your mind in order to confront a supposedly long-forgotten memory. You quickly grasp that this is supposed to be that night, which has been mentioned a couple of times now, and as you walk along the bridge, you realize it's also the raiding of Hirata Estate the merchant was talking about. You find an idol after entering it. So, this moonlight illuminated rainy night in the Hirata Estate, where in some places you have swarming bandits lighting up a giant bonfire and gathering for drink. And in other little corners you find a small farm, or a bunch of barricaded houses in which you can eavesdrop and speak with the citizens through their windows in the quietness, even though you can still hear the bandits making their way through the estate. You know what, I think you get it. This place is dripping with atmosphere. The bandits are nothing special really, because you'll be fighting 10 of them at the same time. The level design is also amazing. It feels so much like an actual town. You can scale some walls and drop on the other side to explore, but you don't have to. In the bonfire here, you find the flame barrel the merchant spoke of. It's primarily used for scaring red-eyed enemies, though you can set almost anyone aflame, and the upgrades will make it worthwhile. Anyway, you also come across the shinobi axe before unlocking a shortcut back to the idol. That's a lot of tools for an optional area, but okay. After unlocking the axe and splitting some shields in half, you face off against Shinobi Hunter Enshin of Minsen. This guy is pretty easy. He's meant to be a Mikiri counter tutorial, and the Mikiri is the second best special posture inflicting ability, you might say. Although some of his thrusts are quite delayed, but it's nothing crazy. You enter the bamboo forest here, and I have to mention it's just so beautiful. After finding another idol, you can drop down into the water, swim to the waterfall, grapple onto a tree, find an item, and break a hidden wall of bamboo. The secret is so intricately hidden, I have no idea how I found it on my own the first time. Here you find the purple ninja. Even though he has only one health bar, he is still very challenging at first, but so intriguing to actually learn. And ultimately you should learn his moveset, as you'll be facing some more annoying versions of them later. Here you find the Mist Raven prosthetic. This is the third prosthetic we've found. I'm starting to think this area isn't that optional. Anyway, the Mist Raven is an extremely useful tool, mostly when it comes to fighting multiple enemies. Doing so normally can be almost impossible as with its gust. However, the Mist Raven allows you to enter a brief stance, and if you're hit, you vanish for a short while and can dash in any direction, then perhaps follow up with a chasing slice if you have it. Going back to the bridge with the waterfall on the right and the rain pouring, like holy shit, why does this game look so good? Anyway, you fight some more bandits in a taro. Then you run across Ao, your father. Not actually, he's your shinobi mentor and he's unfortunately close to death. Ao gives you the key to the Hirata mansion where Kuro's been taken away and demands you be on your way and don't worry about him. So you do some parkour, fight bandits, find an idol, fight bandits, do a little swimming, then fight some more bandits until you clear out the arena for Jizo the Drunkard. I honestly thought this guy was a boss on my first playthrough, not a mini-boss, in part because he was pretty hard for me, but also because the fight is so damn good. He might just be the best example of that when it comes to mini-bosses. The enemies in the arena aren't that hard to kill, but become very annoying if you keep dying to him over and over. I love it when he coats his sword in poison, it forces you to dodge instead of deflect. I also appreciate just how much weight there is to his attacks. Afterwards, you find an idol and meet Inosuke's mother once again, the one who gave you the bell. There is also a secret, which you likely didn't find, seeing as it's the most secret one in the game. I actually remembered it was here on one playthrough, but still couldn't find it. You get divine confetti and a prayer bead for it. For me, Lady Butterfly is an okay boss. She's the first hard one in the game and I really appreciate that. However, and it's entirely possible this is just me, all her combos look the exact same. They are so impossible to memorize. Only on my 5th or 6th playthrough did I start to actually learn her moves. That's bad because all of them are incredibly fast as well, which leaves little room for reaction and more for deflect spamming. They are so fast in fact that attack cancelling just straight up doesn't work on her. If she deflects you and you attack, then immediately deflect in order to cancel the attack, she will hit you. I can't recall any other boss that does this. To be fair, I like it a lot. She is also one of the few bosses which, on some attacks you can deflect, then attack back 2 times before she deflects back. With most fights, it's just once every single time. It's about getting into the flow. Here you have to react and see if she deflects, which is amazing. But anyway, it really does show how ridiculously quick her attacks can be. Phase 2 on the other hand is plainly bad. She will summon phantoms immediately if you let her be for even a second. Whether it's on your part or on hers, there has to be deflecting every single second of the fight, unless you want her to regain her entire posture bar, seeing as you can't fight her when she summons. Literally, even if you want to, she will start levitating. Even if you react as soon as it's humanly possible to realize she's about to summon, it's still barely enough. The quickest I've ever been able to react is with throwing a shuriken, which is instant, and yet she still made the snapping sound effect and the animation, even though it didn't go through. That's how little of a frame you have to react. Ultimately, I love it in Sekiro when posture bars reset quickly, and sometimes I'm willing to give up half of my posture progress in order to heal, because if I die, it doesn't matter anyway. But if I lose 100% of my progress 100% of the time if I have to back down and heal, I think it's a little annoying. And even if I don't, she still does it so quickly that it's impossible to react mid-fight anyway. Okay, we just got an item that apparently unlocks a second resurrection? Yeah, never mind, this area is less optional than the mandatory ones. And just as mysteriously as that, you are back at the temple. Now, this area is surprisingly one I love. I especially liked the Jizo fight. It is a little repetitive when it comes to enemies. They are new, but you one-shot them so they don't get a chance to even do their attacks. However, you find them in very large groups, like 6+ enemies at a time, so anything more complicated wouldn't have really worked. Also, this is probably the most massacring you'd be doing in any area, so if anything, it's unique, and obviously very satisfying. Where the area shines most, however, is its tone and visuals. Also the lore, there's something about visiting that knight the merchant mentioned which appeals to me a lot. But back to Gyobo's arena. Going up the giant stairs, you meet Tengu of Ashina, who invites you to hunt some rats.
Sekiro.
We have a door here that leads near the dead horse guy. It's not a shortcut, but more of a door place for the world to make sense, and I like it. There's a secret up here that gets you a prayer bead. On the outside, you find yet another memorial. Continuing behind the gate Gyobo was guarding, I think it would have been cool to get some enemy dialogue about you defeating Gyobo. Some of them seemed to idolize him, so I expected them to be pretty baffled. Immediately on the right we find some rats. I understand why Tengu hunts them. These are easily some of the most frustrating enemies in the entire game. Their hats act as shields, from under which they quickly slash with miniature knives in patterns that you can't even see. The only way to fight them without having a stroke is with the axe. 2 successful hits split their hats in half. This seemed weird at first, to basically not be able to defeat an enemy if you can't use your prosthetic for some reason. However, these enemies come up very rarely, and this group in particular are right after an idol, so you have your emblems. Besides, we have the shielded thieves, who are much the same way, so it's clearly something the game's going for. Afterwards, you defeat 2 more Taro and a bunch of soldiers. This is probably the time to say this, since we're heading into Ashina Castle. Enemies will be repeating a ton in this game, and yet it never ever gets old. Different stealth death blows, parrying, health, even something like running in, hitting someone 3 times and insta-killing them is all incredibly fun. I'm playing the game for the 6th time in this run, and it's some of the most fun I can imagine having. Just thought I should mention this for the people who have never played the game themselves. You then eavesdrop on some soldiers that mention a blazing bull, and the appearance of this enemy is amazing. However, I find the fight to be incredibly bland. He mostly does 2 different attacks, the head turn and the charge. That's it. You would expect me to hate the fire buildup you get when deflecting, but no, it makes the easy attacks actually scary. Of course, the perfect solution would have been to have good attacks in the first place, but oh well. Either way, the mini-boss is only hard because he's unpredictable and unlike any enemy you've fought so far, and because I always get like 30 FPS in his arena. I'm not coping, you are. Anyway, it's a boring fight and I never look forward to it really. You get some cool dialogue from the soldiers as they're shocked that you made it, before arriving at the next idol. You speak with an insane woman who prays and babbles on about Senpou Temple. From here, you grab on left, kill 2 guys, get a key, and make your way down to the Ashina Reservoir. It's been rehashed with new enemies and loot now, and it's easily one of my favorite features when it comes to Sekiro's world building. I'm glad the Reservoir is one of the repeated areas they chose, since it has great stealth opportunities, and this version delivers exactly that. You unlock the gatehouse, and I'm not sure what the soldier that gave you the key and it have in common, but at least it's quite close. You're likely to have killed them before getting here. In the chest sits the spear prosthetic. It's honestly one of the coolest, but also most useless ones in Sekiro. You can strip the armor off some enemies with it, but I can count all the ones I remember on a single hand. The thrust and cleave upgrades don't upgrade it a lot either, especially the cleave. It's got the biggest wind up in the world, yet also does close to no damage. The Moto Slash does the job 10 times better. In the Moonview Tower waits, 7 Ashina Spears Shikibu Toshikatsu Yamauchi, I guess a relative of General Tenzin Yamauchi. This guy is also one of the most infamous mini-bosses. If you thought the Shinobi Hunter prepared you for Mikir countering in the real world, well, think again. Shikibu is incredibly powerful. If you miss a single deflect and block him instead, he will stagger you and hit you for 80% of your health. Furthermore, even if you succeed in Mikiri countering, he still finishes with one giant attack, which if you deflect, he then finally staggers. I really love this addition, it reminds me of a certain giant monkey you'll face later. Otherwise, this guy becomes incredibly easy once you learn to time your Mikiris to his delayed thrusts, which is pretty difficult in fact. Mikiri is the second most blessed attack you can see, however, after the lightning of course, as in you will be wishing for the enemies to spam it all the time, because it's basically free posture damage. Thus, I'm incredibly impressed they managed to design an enemy around it and have him be so challenging. Returning to the idol, you face off against the General Kironosuke Matsumoto, and he is surrounded by his 4 shotgun goons who don't need to be there. The general can be quite challenging, so having to kill these guys over and over becomes a chore. I found it a good addition with the second general because the enemies were so spaced out, and I like the stealth in Sekiro a ton. Here it's just unnecessary. I don't have much to comment about the general, he seems to be a little more aggressive than the last and also has a new thrust move. He's also the last one in the game, so I'll speak about them as a whole. I mentioned in the first part of the video that I appreciate how many mini-bosses we get, unlike some people, but this is the one exception. We get 3 general mini-bosses in the whole game, and all of them are in the first 2 areas, thus there isn't much changing between their stats and the fights feel the same. Furthermore, with 7 spears for example, you fought one right now and we get to fight the other at the end of the game. Also, you fought the Chained Ogre in the outskirts and we get to fight the other a little before the end of the game. They are greatly spaced out, without having to put them in different areas they don't belong in. You find them in these first 2 areas, but after they're rehashed. The same could have been done with the generals, seeing as they also belong here. Continuing, you meet a man in hiding who claims the samurai around here are after him, and he'd like you to clear them out, as he says. So, you enter another great massacre or a great stealth level before returning to him. He informs you that the grey night jars are guided by purple smoke signals placed along the rooftops. This is a nice way to raise your curiosity and actually push you along the intended path. And you do meet the night jars, though excluding the long flurry, their attacks are mostly weird and just not fun to fight. Although I appreciate this guy, he can stay. After pushing through them, you scale the castle and enter the dojo to the open window, where an idol awaits. I really wonder what exactly these samurai are patrolling for, but it makes for some fun stealth for sure. I also love the quietness of this place, and think it would have been hilarious if every single one's stealth detection marker became orange as soon as you slightly bumped into or broke something. The grandmas do, though they don't actually find you. There's one literally behind me in the corner in this clip. You then find yet another idol. The interval here is really small, and I think a simple shortcut such as kicking down a set of stairs from a hole in the left wall of the room, which would then lead to the first room, could have worked just as well. In the next room awaits the Ashina elite Jinsuke Sazei. This guy just spams a lightning fast flurry for 90% of his attacks, and I think his design is genius. Okay, maybe just a happy little accident. You see, this attack deals chip damage through blocks, and also comes out unbelievably quick. So fast in fact that you can't be blocking just in case, then release it and start deflecting as soon as you see it like you do with most enemies. You have to be standing in the open so as to be able to do it immediately. It's so stressful, but becomes really easy as soon as it clicks. He's obviously repetitive as well, so I'm glad this is the only time we meet him. Behind, you find a painting that displays the technique to deflect lightning attacks by jumping in the air, getting struck, then sending it back before you land. You then step outside and a whistle likely coming from the nightjar signals that you are nearing the top. I was actually very surprised that we find Kuro so early in the game, and it greatly hints at him possibly getting in trouble again in the future. I love how Wolf unsheathes his sword properly this time. The fight with Genichiro Ashina was also surprisingly hard. He happens to be the first really good boss fight in Sekiro as well. He has one of the most iconic combos in the game as far as I'm concerned. It seems like a spam fest similar to the Ashina Elite you just fought, but you have to be surprisingly precise. A couple of the slashes don't reach you sometimes though, so that's a shame. It can throw off your timing. I love his jump and thrust/sweep attack in which you can't actually see which one it will be because of the sparks. It happens often with many bosses, but this is the first one. You can also jump at the last damn frame if you screwed it up and dash for a Mikiri, so that's great. He is in the worst arena in Sekiro however, and spoilers, a couple of other bosses can be fought here too. I will be commenting on each of the fights separately in that regard. When it comes to Genichiro, it's mostly you that is aggressing towards him, so it's rare that you get stuck in a corner or the two doors. Still, it can happen and it's really annoying. Sadly, he has quite the potato AI as well. He clearly stands back and does nothing, way more than any boss as far as I recall. Genichiro also gets pretty upset if you hit him during an attack of his, and completely stops doing anything. It makes the fight feel very scripted and disconnected. That's super unfortunate, cause otherwise it's one of the most fluid fighting in the game. Some might understandably try to justify it as giving you time to heal, but he does it even if you're in front of him. And he has the bow with which he tries to punish healing, so I see it as a completely unrelated mechanic. Oh, and he also does this sometimes. The second phase opens with a surprising but easy thrust. Then you see the infamous lightning attack that's incredibly easy to reflect. Any phase that has this becomes ultimately easy, and this one is no exception. I really wish they had made them a little harder. Only one enemy in the final area manages to do it somewhat. Still, this fight is quite difficult at this part of the game, and probably the marking point of that click moment of Sekiro's combat, for most people anyway. It either happens a little before Genichiro or during his fight, when you realize how simple the combat loop is. Not to suggest that it's even remotely easy or not deep, just simple. To me, the fight also seems incredibly simple today, but will definitely stand out a ton for a new player. I really like it. You then meet Emma of all people and reunite with Lord Kuro, who wishes for the dragon's heritage, the undying power he gave you, to be severed because it brings great misfortune. You cannot agree initially because it contradicts with the Iron Code of the Shinobi. You can only choose to protect him instead, but he then decides to persuade you into doing it anyway, and you can't choose otherwise once again. Kuro comes to the conclusion that you need Ishin's help, so you seek him out in a tower and he treats you to sake for a well done job and calls you Sekiro. Anyway, he mentions that the Mortal Blade is rumored to reside within the Senpou Temple. As to where that might be, you have to figure it out yourself. Upon returning to Kuro, you can give him the Sakura droplet you got from Lady Butterfly to unlock a second resurrection. By that I mean, you can unlock a third node to be filled up for resurrection by killing enemies. So, if you die and resurrect once, you can perform enough dead blows to regain an extra life and resurrect again, and now, after using the droplet, you may do it a third time, before finally dying. Kuro also gives you the Gunforge Shrine Key, which is needed for reaching the Sunken Valley and obtaining some kind of flower. You also need to find a stone residing somewhere in the Ashina Depths. That's all the info you have for now. Oh, and you also find a Shinobi shortcut, a door like that near the Demon Bell. This one leads back to the Dilapidated Temple. I guess that's how Emma cares for both the sculptor and Ishin. Anyway, you likely set off for the first place that comes to mind, the entrance near Ashina Reservoir. After all, the grandma was staring at it while blabbering on about Senpou Temple. So you first have to face off against this big fella. He's quite easy but just ridiculous with this weapon. The grab attacks or whatever you might call them are quite terrifying though. If you paid attention to what the first two soldiers close by were saying, you'll remember that his armor comes off easily. Afterwards, you reach Naido and yet another memorial merchant. You then enter the Ashina Depths. However, this is mostly a sneak peek, as you're just passing through to reach Senpou Temple. Still, you do see a little bit, so I'll comment on it. The main enemies here are the zombie dudes that draw pacifying agents, a very, very useful item when fighting the Headless mini-bosses and others that inflict hurts. These enemies are frankly annoying. Their only attack is a very slowly charged up grab which forces you to just move away. Wow, so engaging. On top of that, they get up once more after you kill them. A cool moment, but quickly becomes annoying. Here you find a note stating that, in order to reach the village in Ashina Depths, you ought to throw yourself. You also meet Dojan, who requests that you find and bring him an alive and unharmed tough man. Continuing, you swim along a small cave and kill some samurai before taking an elevator to the Senpou Temple. Some mysterious voice emitting from a painting warns you to be particularly careful, for those in the Senpou Temple have sought immortality through disturbing means. Immediately outside you meet Kotaro, whose friends are all dead. It's pretty apparent that you ought to help him, but cannot yet. Side quest after side quest, I wonder if these will tie together somehow. Anyway, you meet a large number of monks gathered in one place. I think you are kind of encouraged to take your time and pick them off with all the bushes and trees lying around, and obviously by the fact that some of them are greatly spaced out and don't detect you that well. However, you will most certainly end up engaging an entire group. There are a couple here. That's great because these guys are incredibly fun to fight in groups, since the staff ones in particular are so well balanced for that. They aren't that hard to fight one-on-one, and thus not ridiculous in groups. Yet they aren't incredibly weak like the bandits or samurai either. Their health is rather low, but their posture is quite a lot for common enemies. Their thrust attack also comes more from the side than any other enemy in the game. Executing a Mikiri can be difficult that way. The weaker fist fighting variety on the other hand has a sudden grab attack. Continuing, you face this new creepy enemy that's immortal. You also meet yet another damn praying grandma. This one is blabbering about fruits and wants rice. So now we have another fetch quest. She's pointing like the previous one, yet the location seems unreachable. After meeting her, you fight a group of bandits, but more importantly, 2 spear adepts, who are frankly some of the most annoying enemies in the whole game. Their posture meters are massive, and it's greatly exacerbated by the fact that they leap around so much, most often while throwing shurikens at you. Your shurikens are barely fast enough to get them out of the air, so ceramic shards don't work well. If you don't have spirit emblems, fighting these guys for minutes is a nightmare, and the fact that we have 2 of them here is, in my opinion, ridiculous. You then find an idol after grappling onto a little rock valley thingy. It's filled with more rats. At this point I realized that I actually like encountering these guys a lot. Don't get me wrong, I still hate them, but that's exactly what makes doing this so satisfying. After climbing the rocks, you find a red and white pinwheel. You can also reach a little secret area here with a white pinwheel and the demon bell. At this point you've definitely played enough to know that you probably shouldn't ring it on your first time, so placing it in Senpou Temple is great. On top of the rocks lies a long and dark bridge, and inside the dark bridge awaits the armored warrior. His sturdy European armor ensures that no vitality damage can be inflicted on this man, so the only way to defeat him is to push him off the bridge. Thus, it's more of a puzzle rather than a fight, seeing as he is otherwise incredibly easy. I think his thrust in particular is too charitable. In this clip, it doesn't look to me as if I should have gotten that, but perhaps the timing is off or I'm simply over-exaggerating. Either way, I pushed him off by accident my first time, but I can definitely imagine some struggling for quite a while otherwise. He doesn't need to be hard though, since he's kind of a meme character. Ironically so, since his story is quite tragic. TLDR, him and his son came over from Europe to cure his son's illness. They sold firecrackers, yes the very ones you have, to raise funds for their travels. Their supposed final destination, where they could get a hold of at least some information about the rejuvenating waters that he hoped to cure his son with, was the Senpou Temple at Mount Congo. The monks promised to help if he could defend their land with his life, and that's exactly what he tried to do. You then arrive at the next idol. You can choose to diverge from your path and go down, fighting some monkeys and a taro. There's nothing here actually, besides the other side of the broken bridge, which is a very nice click moment. You can also do this of course. Returning, you find some giant carps swimming in the water. After fighting some more monks, rats and bomb-throwing monks, you drop onto a roof and enter to meet this guy. Long-armed centipede Senun, whatever that abomination is. The only real challenge is picking off his minions, which becomes incredibly annoying whenever they keep throwing fire at you on these narrow beams, but also incredibly easy once you realize they're susceptible to airborne death blows even without stealth. The Senun himself is quite unique and I like him a lot. Some people say you need to spam deflect on his attacks and I disagree completely. It's like saying the same about Genichiro's combo. There are a lot of attacks, sure, but the centipede clearly hits in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 pattern. The only actual enemy you need to spam on is that Ashina elite near Genichiro, and I feel that people are just trying to justify their newbie skills, which I do understand, but still. Afterwards, you climb the mountain back up, meeting this giant group of wolves along the way. You're probably meant to use firecrackers or do this. Continuing to make your way up, you fight more monks and this lone shielded Taro, who, if you split his shield, just starts crying and readies for the death blow. It's hilarious and sad. What's also sad is that we meet more spear adepts, and obviously skip them before arriving at the idol. Oh, and this is probably the first time you realize you can do this. To the left is the Headless Reminiscent Cave that's actually filled with nothing more than some centipedes. At the top, you find a book that unlocks a new martial arts skill tree. Returning to the main hall, you take a look around and find a small bell. This is the puzzle boss of Sekiro, and I think it's more of a chasing fiasco than a puzzle. Sure, you can make it a little easier on yourself by figuring out that the first one has good vision but poor hearing, the second has poor vision but good hearing, the third lacks both but will alert all the others if it sees you, and the fourth is invisible, so you ought to look out for its footsteps. But you can also just run them down and kill them. It's not that hard, you don't need Gachin sugar or anything like that really. You can grapple and kill the seeing one immediately, you will eventually bump into the invisible one, the alerting one is the easiest to track down and will pose no threat if it's one of the last, and the hearing one is quite annoying, but simply cornering it into one of the towers and doing this is simple enough. Overall, this boss is a great idea, but the execution not so much. For how much I love the stealth in Sekiro, I was very surprised FromSoft didn't pull it off. When it comes to Senpou Temple, the area is awesome. It's not quite as memorable as the other ones, but really fun to play around with the enemies in. Afterwards, you meet the Divine Child and receive the Mortal Blade. So, that's done. We should probably go back to Kotaro for now. Now that you have obtained both the white pinwheel and the red and white pinwheel, you have three possible choices. A. Give the white one and use the Divine Abduction prosthetic on him, a tool you'll get in one of the next areas, which will send him to the Hall of Echoes. B. Give him the red and white one and convince Kotaro to work for Anayama, the former thief now merchant you met back in Ashina Outskirts. Or C. Give him the red and white one as well and send him off to Doujin in the abandoned dungeon to be used for his master's experiments. So your next objective is reaching the village and obtaining the stone. Not much to go on, but you do know that it's located within the Ashina Depths and that one enters them by casting oneself. That was written on a note in the abandoned dungeon, so you return there and see that, indeed, there is a little diversion hidden in the darkness. This is a Shichimen warrior, and he's one of the most frighteningly annoying enemies in the game. One of the problems with him is that he's incredibly based on RNG. Sometimes you hit him 30 times and he just takes it without doing anything, and sometimes he decides to disappear after getting smacked twice. Well, what's the big problem with that? Once you get close, there's not much he can do. It's an endurance fight, just drag it out. That's true, but there is another problem. You need to use a rare item called Divine Confetti in order to damage him. Not to damage him more, but at all. The Divine Confetti is an incredibly rare item you need at least 2 of, but better 3 on a lucky day with this guy, and you'll likely have to farm for it many times. It's like the Headless fight, which I don't know why I'm saying because 99% of you will be fighting this guy first, much like me. I'll explain later why Headless is so well executed and terrifying, but just believe me, he is, and this guy isn't. It's not like I'm so scared of losing my confetti so I just start panicking and turn the easy fight into a hard one by a result of my own dread, but rather I really hope I don't get unlucky and have to farm again. On the other hand, at his best, he's no more than a punching bag. After him, you meet a different old lady? I honestly can't keep track of them at this point, but after dropping into the abyss, you grapple onto a small cave which leads to the Ashina Depths. That means you've now seen everything Abandoned Dungeon has to offer. This area is really small, so much so that I honestly hesitate to even call it an area. It seems more like a part of Ashina Castle than anything, seeing as the castle itself is on the smaller side anyway. It is considered a separate area by the game's idol system, however, and I wish it was actually finished. Looking back, I almost feel as if I'm taking the area size in Dark Souls 3 for granted. This is an even more severe case of that seeing great potential and atmosphere for 20 minutes before you're out of the area that I mentioned in the Dark Souls 3 video. And now that you are out of it, you arrive at the Ashina Depths. After finding an idol, you emerge into a small poisonous swamp. The marksmen here have an unbelievably good sight, so you'll get spotted immediately and probably try and find a place to hide, and that's how you find the next idol. This one is great since you might be dying a lot here, and having another side space to start in is good, but the previous one becomes useless in my opinion. This area is not as great with stealth as I imagined. There are actually only 4 or 5 enemies here besides the mini-boss, and only one of them is powerful enough to not be instantly guard broken, and actually has to be deflected instead. The small group of 2 you can kill easily, and the rest overlook each other, so you'll probably end up aggroing them all if you try sneaking around. The mini-boss is Snake Eyes Shura, and I love fighting her. She's also one of the hardest at first. She deals a lot of damage, her attacks are hard to deflect, and the grab has quite the range. However, she also takes huge damage to her posture from simply blocking your attacks, which even does more than most enemies before deflecting. On top of that, the grab can easily be deflected, though most people wouldn't even think about that. The mini-boss is the only ranged one in the game, and it's what makes her so unique. You then exit the cave to arrive at the mystical, dreamy and overgrown forest. If you fall to the base of the trees, you'll find a bunch of bandit spirits. Nothing is different about them besides the fact that some become invisible if you aren't close. You also find this guy, and guess what, you have the items to take him on now. The Divine Confetti in order to damage him, and the Pacifying Agent in order to cure terror buildup. We should probably state the obvious, he looks absolutely terrifying and his soundtrack helps tremendously. The biggest problem people have with him is that you need Divine Confetti in order to damage him, but I think that when it comes to Headless, it's one of the best mechanics in the game really. Headless is not actually that hard. His attacks are very odd and delayed, sure, especially the spin, which looks as if it connects way later than it should, and also some are quite sudden. But he has huge intervals between his combos, and sometimes you can even strike multiple times during the combo, between single attacks. Then you learn that when he vanishes, he appears behind you and tries to grab you, without the red kanji, which is great, and when he stops trying, he always gets tired and stands still for a couple of seconds, basically giving you 1/5 of his health for free. And yet, he is still so terrifying, because you're using Divine Confetti. It runs out and you need to finish him fast since the item is so rare. It stresses you out a lot and works brilliantly with Headless's design of leaving huge openings for attacks, but also having very sudden moves. If you want to, you can literally spam left click whenever he isn't attacking, but you need to be able to back it up with decent reaction time, which, let's be honest, you won't have when panicking. He also has an aura which slows you down. It makes the fight very floaty and unsafe feeling. It makes me feel as if I'm playing Dark Souls 2, and there isn't a more oppressive feeling than that to have, so it's great. Seriously though, it immediately puts the idea into your head that, okay, I probably can't get away from these detrimental, terror-inducing, hard-to-parry attacks. I need to stay close to this monstrosity and just deflect. In short, I love this enemy, an otherwise simple and easy one to defeat made difficult only by your own self-inflicted terror. However, this one's placement is so incredibly scumbaggy that I have no other choice but to call it out. The spirits here actually respawn, and they won't hesitate to kill you if you take your fight with Headless outside his little corner, and that will definitely happen, with him chasing you around to grab you by the ass and all. If you clear out the whole pit, they still don't respawn for quite a while, which means there's no reason for you to think they do. If it was any other mini-boss, it still would have sucked, but the fact that it's the Divine Confetti one of all things just makes it 10 times worse. But I do love that he's placed under the trees which you might fall from and right next to him. It's actually what happened to me the first time I came here and it was horrifying. But anyway, after traversing the trees, you arrive at another spirit-infested place. Grappling left, you meet a Jizo lookalike surrounded by some monkeys. They are really easy to pick off and not as annoying as Jizo's tease. This is Toko Jizo the Glutton, and he is basically identical to Jizo. Spoiler, there's a third drunkard which inflicts and applies to his weapon something else rather than poison, which makes me wonder why this one doesn't. As much as people hate it, terror could have been a nice fit for this creepy forest. Something about a person named the Glutton vomiting his food onto you and his weapon mid-fight would have been hilarious, I think, and frankly quite fit for terror-inducing. After defeating him, you traverse some more trees and drop into the locked house, killing the Mist Noble, which is a completely defenseless enemy. Doing it gets rid of the spirits, unlocks the path forward and reveals the whole area to be cherished by your eyes, which is not easy to resist. No matter how many times I've seen it, the area is still quite the sight. It also allows you to fight Headless in peace now, but you couldn't have known that back when fighting him for the first time anyway. Continuing, you drop down quite a lot and arrive at an idol next to a small river. Here you find another damn memorial mob. How many are there? This one sells a purple gourd, which works much like the healing gourd but heals curse. Very, very useful. Also, in between the rocks is a purple ninja, or rather a purple lone shadow. They look almost identical at first glance, though the attacks differ quite a bit. This one in particular does a long combo that ends with a thrust kick, and some fist attacks that inflict poison. He is significantly harder than the Hirata Estate ninja. Forward is the Mibu village, the same one you've been hearing about. The enemies here are nothing short of extremely boring and stupid. You one-shot every single one of them, and they keep respawning forever. There are 8 different varieties of them. 8! Just why? I don't care about respawning enemies. I will literally run past while getting all the items and be on my way, and I expect most people to do the same. There's nothing interesting here, by the way. Maybe the ones which grab you by the feet so the other weak ones can try and kill you are kind of interesting, but they most often can't even do that. You arrive at an idol right after. Near you meet a crying woman. This is Orin of the Water, and she is the only unique enemy I never managed to defeat in my first playthrough. That's weird since today she's incredibly easy. She's also the one enemy that made me realize how Divine Confetti works on an anxious person such as myself. At first I assumed I needed it for her, but in fact you only get a slight damage boost, like basically any enemy. When I don't use it with her, I can try as many times and likely not even need that many. Her combos are quite long and build up your posture quickly, but she also gives you more time to block and get it down than almost any enemy in the game. She also has quite the big posture bar herself, and yet she also spams sweep attacks throughout the whole fight. Her bar also goes down way slower than most enemies, even with full HP. Once the intimidation of Divine Confetti is gone from this fight, it becomes incredibly easy. You fight a small group of even smaller Mibu villagers and arrive at an arena. The Corrupted Monk is the only full boss fight in the game that has a single HP bar. She is basically the losing your progress part of Sekiro taken to the absolute extreme. Her posture recovery is ridiculous. In the beginning of the fight, you will literally parry an entire combo, then the moment she stops attacking, you can see her posture go whoop in a split second, back to 0. Even when her health is like 1/3 of the way there, it's still faster than most enemies. It does help however, obviously, and there are many ways to go about lowering it. Her jump over attack can be sidestepped for 2 quick hits, and she'll usually permit a single hit at the end of deflecting a combo. And her combos are all so fluid and satisfying to time and deflect. When I was having trouble and dying over and over, I couldn't stop fighting her and never got angry because it was so damn fun. Today she's a total joke, so I never kill her right away. It's genuinely fun. She can be heavily chased with ashes and firecrackers however. A single handful of ash gives you 3 free vitality hits and you can basically spam them. You can get 2 or 3 with the firecrackers as well, I'm not sure, but that's easily 30 free hits with the ashes alone and it trivializes the fight completely. She is still one of the most fun and atmospheric bosses in the game and I always look forward to fighting her. You get the breathe underwater skill from her which allows you to dive and reach new places. Afterwards, you enter the Wedding Cave and retrieve the stone. The Ashina Depths area overall is one which I think I have no business enjoying as much as I do. It has 2 instances of respawning enemies, which is one of my least favorite things in FromSoft games. The enemies in question are not interesting in the slightest, with one of them being a rehash and the other straight up terrible fodder. It also has the most scumbaggy moment in the whole game with the Headless placement. And yet, it still does have Headless, one of my favorite enemies in the game, and also Shirahagi, Tokujizo, Orin, and one of my favorite bosses. It also has the best setting in the whole game. It's so incredibly creepy and well put together. I somehow feel like I played a whole damn game set in it, and kind of want one now. It was easily the second most memorable one behind the next one, and thus, the second I look most forward to, even though it's flawed. You then return to Kuru with the stone. We might as well cover half of the alternative ending steps now. Let me just say, even over a year later, the instructions online are still hella confusing. Some tell you to do it before collecting all the items for the essence, and others after, with both claiming that doing it otherwise wouldn't work, and some tell you to do half now and half later. Furthermore, some say you need to exhaust all of Kuro's eavesdropping opportunities, but I only had one before getting the stone and one after. So let me present what worked for me. After saving Kuro, exhaust all of his and Emma's dialogue and his eavesdropping opportunities. Don't try and rest multiple times on travel in and out of the room if eavesdropping doesn't work. Just make sure to go back and try again after important events like getting the Mortal Blade or Shine Stone. Eavesdrop on Emma when she's talking with the sculptor. This happened after eavesdropping Kuro for the second time. Then go back to Kuro's room upstairs and talk to her and select I agree. That's everything for now. The only remaining area can be reached by dropping down in the Ashina Castle dojo. Here you fight some samurai before opening the door. You can go down, which takes you to this little camp thingy with more soldiers and more of these cannon guys you met one of back at the Ashina Outskirts. Not much interesting besides a friendly rat who sells the loaded umbrella prosthetic and anti-air deathblow skill. Oh, and you also stand on the other side of the broken bridge near Chained Ogre. This was probably the best click moment in the whole game for me. It ties Ashina together so well. I also realized just how close the giant serpent was to the castle. It's kind of terrifying. It probably broke the bridge in the first place as well. Anyway, going back, you can turn left and eavesdrop on these soldiers. If you remember about Anayama the peddler, this is the piece of information stating what the samurai want that he wanted so much. Afterwards, you enter a small but beautiful snowy forest that leads to another idol. There is a large ravine in front, and on one of the rocks we find yet another idol. The distance between this and the one near the broken bridge is already too little, but having the one before the ravine as well in between them is just ridiculous. Going right, you find 3 of these weak rifle guys and dive into the water to find the Headless on the other side. Going back and heading left instead, you encounter more while making your way down the rocks. You will eventually face the shotgun enemy, which is one of the most difficult mobs in the entire game. Their posture is insane and they have 100% poise. You can't stagger them with attacks. It's possible I'm just fighting them wrong or haven't faced them as much in game, but they always frustrate me a ton. From the idol here, you jump down and hear this. A whole army of enemies has spotted you somehow. It's a nerve-wracking moment, but I would have appreciated if they had a good chance of actually hitting you. Unless you're standing still, it won't happen. You encounter yet another Snake Eyes mini-boss, Shira Fuji. It's no different than the previous one. There's a hole in the bridge afterwards. It's really obvious, so it's surprising just how often it gets you while you worry about the marksman shooting at you. Exploring this little fortress here is very fun and stressful the first time around. You have no idea what you might run into or step on and thus alert like 5 enemies. Today I know where every shotgun guy is so I can pick them all off. I know what the noise traps look like and I know that there is an idol in the cave nearby. In the cave you fight the long-armed centipede giraffe. There are no small ones now, which makes this one even easier. Thus I don't think we should have had the idol before him, but right after. Exploring the fortress is way more engaging without the idol in arm's reach. Most people would probably do it before trying to take on the giraffe since he's still a mini-boss, even if he's an easy one. And if not, then out of fear that they're skipping a chunk of the area. Behind him is the Divine Abduction prosthetic tool. Continuing, there are some small caves you can reach by going under the floor here. Nothing interesting but a bunch of small centipedes. Back to the bridge. I knew it was going to appear with all the snow around, but it was still surprising to me. Here you have to dive in order to get to the cave without angering the snake, which leads me to believe FromSoft wanted players to experience this area after Mibu Village, and there is in fact a good reason for that. You can still do it without diving though. You find an idol and emerge from the cave to find this beautiful valley with statues and snow and red trees and monkeys with rifles? What? This area is probably the most beautiful one in the game. At the end here you fight the boss, 30 damn monkeys. Okay, it's not a boss, but it does a better job at being the deacons from Dark Souls 3 than the deacons from Dark Souls 3. It's finally the one fight that you have to use all of your AoE attacks in order to pick them off. Jumping behind an enemy to perform blood smoke, using firecrackers, then using the cleave spear, using whirlwind with the mortal blade art. It's actually fairly balanced, even though it's kind of a meme fight. The crazy lady is somehow here now. Like, how does she get through everything without having to fight for her life like you do? Anyway, she says that dried fruit is incredibly close now, lying somewhere hidden in the poison swamp below. You have some rice by this point, and after giving it to her, she tells you to make the monkey dance. Great. Dropping down, you will find a disgusting and poisoned pool indeed, and it's a great contrast to the bright snow. The dark red reminds me of the painted world from Dark Souls 3. There's a dual-wielding sword monkey down here. It's the best enemy in the game. But there is not much else interesting, besides yet another memorial mob. This one's unique item is a poison build-up reducing / resistance increasing gourd. although next to him is a dark and spooky cave. Upon entering, you quickly realize that the snake is here, and the way you can literally see its eyes from the entrance is terrifying. And so is actually traversing the cave, as you silently crawl while lizards and wall people chase you. Getting close and almost bumping into the snake is inevitable as well. The cave is confusing to navigate, and that's great since it leaves all the more time for you to screw up and alert the serpent. But there is this one leap of fate at the end here where you can't really see your destination. It's very annoying. You find a lonely and scared monkey which you have to make dance and have it get eaten? By using the Nunjitsu Puppeteer, of course, you can make it run off and alert the serpent, leaving you time to sneak by and grab the dried serpent viscera. No idea what this is, but it sure looks important. You resurface and return to the idol. On the other side of the swamp, you see a spectacular arena, a shallow lake full of trees and surrounded by even more giant statues, and in the middle of it all stands a hunched over white ape. The Guardian Ape is my second favorite boss in Sekiro. By the way, you're watching a Reflection of Strength rematch which has more health than the original fight. The original footage I had was just too laggy to use. Anyway, we should probably state the obvious. The ape looks menacing as hell and feels just as powerful. Whoever did the design with the sword sticking out of its neck and the long claws did a phenomenal job, and so did the composer of its theme. The gameplay, however, is so intense. It's the most intense one in the game, for sure. The ape just goes insane during the whole fight. If you deflect this one attack, he falls to the ground. You make him so angry that he starts thrashing around. What the hell is he doing? If you stand behind him, he farts in your face, which inflicts poison. But then he reaches into his ass and pulls out a giant shit and throws it in your face. Then finally just scratches it, which is an attacking opportunity if you manage to dodge it. They clearly had no shame while making this boss, but hey, I'm not complaining, it's fucking hilarious. Giving him varied combos is also great, since you'll be hitting him in between them a lot, so you gotta watch out for that kind of thing. Getting him staggered is also great. Here's how it works. You hit him enough times, he staggers once, you get to spam attack him until he staggers again and runs off, but if you chase after him out of confidence because you want to get some more free hits in, he turns around and jumps to grab you. It's actually terrifying the first time, and I still try to do it since you can get to him and smack him a couple of times in fact. Some people say this boss throws out everything you've learned about the game out the window, and I disagree completely. First of all, he's the first non-humanoid enemy in the game. Well, apes are humanoids, but you know what I mean, it's more like a monster fight. But still, you can deflect literally everything besides the grabs, and you should if you want to have fun with the fight and possibly beat him faster, since it is a viable strategy to max out his posture bar. This fight is a little on the shorter side, but it's amazing and his execution is extremely badass. Okay, I can't pretend anymore. Yes, there is a phase 2, and it's the biggest and most genius bait FromSoft's ever done. I understand why some people might be mad at it, but I find it hilarious. Not only do you get the shinobi execution text, but you cut off his head. I knew there was gonna be a second phase, said nobody ever. I love it. The fight itself is way simpler and easier than the first phase. The ape begins to move in some sort of slithering, centipede-like manner. I wonder why. The sword attacks are so unpredictable, but really satisfying to deflect. If you deflect the last powerful one he does on most of his combos, the ape gets staggered for a very long time. You can use the spear to pull out the centipede inside him and inflict huge vitality and posture damage, which is so cool. Though I do think it's too big of a reward, since you don't need to deflect the whole combo in fact, just the last attack. You can stand out and wait for it then move in. Sometimes he'll literally do one attack instead which you can block, then do his final one that's incredibly easy to parry. Yes, some people might not know about the spear, but you still get to hit him at least 5 times, which is quite a lot. You can also perform any weapon art to use prosthetics and items in peace. His most common attack is the terrifying shriek he does after putting his head back on. It inflicts terror and is so damn cool, but it's impossible to get hit by. You also can't dodge it or follow it up with anything. It's basically waiting around until he goes back to fighting you, and he spams it quite often. Running out and healing is already possible, so I see no reason for this one. It definitely should have been made harder by making it tick faster or deal more terror damage, be more sudden, or even remove the red kanji. The best solution I could come up with though was to make the range bigger and have you need to use one of the trees to grapple out. It's possible there wouldn't be any in range though, so they would have needed to work on that as well. You would have to be aware of your surroundings and always have a tree nearby. Going further, why not even make it so you need to finish the fight before he topples all of them? If he did, they could have made it so you wouldn't have time to avoid most of the terror damage, but instead be left with like 1/5 of your health remaining and 4/5 of the terror build-up. Therefore, you could heal up and cure the terror and thus have plenty of time to fight on. This phase is amazing as it is, but feels a little too simple and easy at times. After defeating the ape for real now, you recover the Lotus of the Palace, the last ingredient you need. When trying to warp back to Ashina Castle though, you realize that all of the idols are grayed out, except the abandoned dungeon entrance one. Before going there, however, we have a couple of things to do. If you go back to the poison cave in Ashina Depths, you find the camp wrecked and most of their marksmen dead. One of them managed to stay alive long enough to utter the words "large ape" with his last dying breath. Alright, now we have to fight him again. I'm not complaining at all, I love this fight. You start off in phase 2 already, naturally, which also means that the next phase has to be something different, right? I wonder what cool twist they'll pull on one of my favorite bosses. So you likely wreck him, now having gotten better at the game and knowing what to expect, and now there's 2 of them. Great. If anyone knows anything about me, you know I hate this kind of stuff in boss fight. Not actually just fighting multiple enemies, no, I'm fully aware that FromSoft had designed good 1v2 boss fights in the past. The problem is that there are 2 categories for these kinds of fights. It can obviously vary, but A. The enemies were specifically designed for the fight and made to work together in a fair and interesting way during the encounter, or B. Take a single enemy and duplicate it, or take 2 enemies you've already fought who weren't designed for this kind of fight. This fight falls into the B category, and it doesn't work in the slightest. There is literally nothing interesting about it. Both of them are extremely aggressive and there is no way to split them apart most of the time. You just have to watch their attacks overlap and wait for the super perfect moment to hit the female ape 3 times and run out. The fight doesn't feel as if you're fighting 2v1. It feels like 2 1v1s at the same time. The AI doesn't even seem to recognize that it's not a 1v1, as they're both rushing at you constantly. In short, this is not Ornstein in small, but more like Ornstein and Ornstein, or that one moment where the twin demons both become melee, but the entire fight is like that. Basically, it's lazy and it sucks. And now you may warp to the abandoned dungeon entrance idol. Nothing seems out of the ordinary except this one samurai complaining about no one taking his shift. However, you will immediately realize that the castle has been overrun by Interior Ministry Red Guards, who are somehow single-handedly succeeding in tracking down and exterminating all of the Ashina army. Of course, they are no match for you, the single shinobi, as you slice and dice your way through these dual-wielding ones. They are nothing special when fought 1v1, so as soon as you reach the first idol, you're obviously pinned up against 2 or possibly 3 if you pull them all. The fight is surprisingly fair and interesting if you use prosthetics and combat arts. It's a nice way to show how far you've come. Oh, and you also hear this, which might bring about a PTSD-induced panic attack. And then you make your way to the dojo much like before. Nothing is different except you face more red guards, red colored rats instead of the usual ones, and some pink ninjas you can stealth kill nicely. The dojo is identical too, but with a single pink ninja instead of an old samurai. You can go up to Isshin's room from here and eavesdrop on him and Emma discussing you, and how Genichiro will most likely be back again. When speaking to them, they weirdly don't act as if anything at all is out of the ordinary in Ashina. Going back to the top of the dojo, you face Lone Shadow Vile Hand. You'll be stuck in a room with him and an ordinary pink ninja if you don't kill it in the beginning, which I really hope is what you're supposed to do. If you're meant to fight them at the same time though, I'll lose a little bit of hope in From Software. But anyway, you've fought many like him before, so he's nothing special. At the top you find your father Ao of all people. He's the one who orchestrated the whole thing due to his desire for the dragon's heritage, and as your father he demands that you forsake Kuro and join his side. You obviously refuse. The fight begins with one of the most badass cutscenes in the game, and it's fitting, seeing as Ao is also one of the most badass characters in the game. Ao is also a giant asshole. He throws bombs that disable any consumables, he uses poison and smoke, and he acts defeated in the end of the first phase, baiting an attack out of you before retreating. The shinobi is not a fair fighter, and you already know that. Wolf uses all kinds of tricks and stealth kills to defeat his enemies. A shinobi will do anything to win, and it really opens your eyes as to how it feels to be on the other end of that. Almost unfair. The boss is also a big endurance fight. He has an extremely fast regenerating posture bar, and killing him without damaging 1/3 of his health at least is impossible, unless you're approaching third replay at least. Luckily, FromSoft have put many attacks where we can damage his vitality. His overhead slash you can quick step sideways and follow up with an attack. You can also dash to the sideways slash one, since it's fast enough for your narrow invincibility frames. Same with the green bomb he throws, which prevents the use of consumables as we said. You have to be very careful when quick stepping it and attacking Ao, as it's really easy to get caught in. He usually does it after a very recognizable slash attack, but he can sometimes continue attacking instead, so you have to watch out for that as well. He uses firecrackers too, which is really cool, and so is the fact that he actually uses a freaking Mikiri counter on you if you do a charged thrust attack. The only change in the second phase is how he now uses poison instead of shurikens. It makes the arena even more tight and I like it a lot. It obviously works with the green bomb as well since you can't use antidotes. In this fight you are in every single way discouraged from deflecting before you get his health down. I honestly think that's fine, but I can also see the other side of the argument. It does kind of encourage cheesy tactics such as running around and waiting for the jump or bomb so you can damage him. Some people might see that you can do that and ask themselves, why don't I do that for the whole fight? I literally cannot lose. I don't do it. I try to deflect everything but the jump and the slash, yet even when I do almost everything perfectly, I get literally nothing out of it. It's more like I'm doing it because I feel like I'm obliged to, not because I need to. For some reason, running around and waiting for a specific attack just feels wrong. I do think Ao would have been better off with a bigger posture bar that runs out slower. It would have been nice to make very tiny progress in the beginning, which slowly quickens as you damage his vitality, than to make no progress until you damage 1/3 of it. On the contrary, I do understand that constantly being stressed out about making any little mistake because it can force you to run back and heal and also set the boss's posture bar is a great addition in Sekiro. The boss is also sadly in the worst arena in the game, and also the worst one out of all the bosses you fight here in that regard. That's because Ao pushes you back so often and gets you pinned up against the walls, especially the stupid doors, which you'll probably die from getting stuck in more than anything else combined. That being said, I love this fight. It adds such a nice character to Ao, seeing all the underhanded tactics he uses. I do think vitality damage plays a too big of a role compared to posture damage in this fight, but he's amazing nonetheless. After defeating Ao, we can also proceed with the alternative ending. Emma tells you that you need to get flowers from the Everblossom tree, though the branch you found in Ao's possession had none. She then decides to visit Tekiru and Tomoe's graves to perhaps recall something. They are located near where you met Black Hat Badger for the first time. The path there remains the same as the last time and no enemies have changed. Except... this ogre's placement is perfect in my opinion. He's pretty much the same, with health and damage relative to your own identical to the last time. However, he's in a much smaller room, and yet you will still likely beat his ass more than you did last time. It goes to show you how far you've come in terms of skill. Nothing he does is really too fast or hard to dodge anymore. You speak to Emma at the graves. She says she didn't recall anything but decides to visit the sculptor back at the Dilapidated Temple. So you go there and eavesdrop on them. You hear Emma saying that if you pursue this path, either you or Kuro must die, so she doesn't want to give you the thing because she fears for your life. You obviously confront her and make her give you the thing, the Father's Bell charm. You pray with it to the Buddha statue once again and get sent back to Hirata Estate, though much deeper in this time, almost till the end, where you met Ao the first time. Here you fight Lone Shadow Masanaga the Spearbearer, who bears a sword of course. He's the usual Lone Shadow mini-boss, though he whistles from time to time to summon his dogs which attack you. I really like this mechanic, but they still attack you even if he doesn't. Quite often in fact, you'll be smacking him and out of your screen somewhere jumps out a dog and bites you. Not even when you're close to them, which would have still been bad. They do it all the time. You can't kill them either as they simply respawn. It's a really lazy implementation and I frankly hate it. You can't skip him though, so there's that. The only other change is to Jizo's fight. There's now a purple ninja right next to him, though you can easily blood smoke one of the weak archers on the side and then sneak kill the ninja. Otherwise, Jizo is much the same as before, and I would have loved some little twist, just anything. He's still fun I guess, but it's not as good as the Chained Ogre since we fought a Jizo identical enemy not that far in the Ashina Depths. I think it's too soon. Father Ao is a great boss, but in my opinion not as good as the previous. And you know that's not biased because they didn't find him that difficult. In fact, in many ways I think most people should have less trouble with him than the original. He has way higher damage, HP and posture, sure, but he's charitable in more ways than not. He doesn't use the green bombs or the poison anymore. He's in a way bigger arena. He doesn't clear his posture anymore, so you can spam firecrackers recklessly till you run out of emblems as you don't have to save some for shurikens. Continuing, he gives you a free, basically impossible to miss Mikiri counter after he uses the firecrackers. He has this overhead attack that you can easily get 3 hits on, maybe 4, and you obviously already have the knowledge of Ao's attacks. Also, I'm 100% sure that Father Ao is 10 times less aggressive than the previous. I don't know if it's intentional or perhaps caused by his new moveset, but it's a fact. He's on one of those bosses that might do a faster attack than yours the moment you start doing one, so you get hit. So it's not like you can be the first one to strike. Now, we all love that back and forth loop of Sekiro's combat, so I expected to hate this change. And I kind of did at first. It can be quite frustrating with all the waiting around, despite the fight not being that difficult. But it's really fun to be the incredibly aggressive one, more than in any other boss in the whole game, to constantly be running at him non-stop from start to finish. When it comes to phase 2, he incorporates his Ao spirit form, or whatever, into some of his attacks. He basically just merges with it and becomes invulnerable, then it drops him off to suddenly attack you. Suddenly in quotation marks, since you just have to run around and he'll fall somewhere behind you. It just stalls the fight, I think, and doesn't really add anything. He does do this badass fire attack, which he then follows up with a thrust, so the spirit Ao isn't that bad. If you hit him while he is casting it, he'll get staggered, yet the attack will go off nonetheless, and that's weird. Oh, and he also does this super long combo that ends with the brutal firecracker slash. I love it. And with this, you have acquired the vital item needed for the alternative ending. By this point in the game, you can also complete all the steps needed for the secret ending. First, you need to dive into the pool next to the temple grounds idol in Senpou Temple and retrieve the holy chapter infested. Then you have to request rice from the divine child, travel in and out and request more until she starts feeling sick. That's when you give her a permission and she gives you back some rice for Kuro. You give it to him and he makes sweet rice balls from it, after which you report back to the child and give her the holy chapter. You then speak with her in the Halls of Illusion. She asks you to retrieve the second chapter from a priest located near where the Senpou Temple skill book was. You do retrieve it, but also find him dead. After that, she asks for 2 snake hearts. You already obtained one actually, near the guardian ape. The other is kind of hard to figure out, but still incredibly obvious. The rice granny will tell you how to do it if you give her rice. You know, the one the child gave you so much of. Anyway, you need to puppeteer this rat here so he can raise the kite, the one which you could only raise for a short while on your own. You then walk all the way to it and grapple onto some rocks, eventually reaching a cave. You meet Black Hat Badger here, he's visiting his son's grave. More importantly, you see this after walking out. You then return to the child and she proceeds to consume the hearts. You have to eavesdrop on the sounds of her doing it. Returning, she gives you the frozen tears, the item needed for this secret ending. This is quite the convoluted ending route, but most people will be stubborn enough to figure out the rest after finding the holy chapter and for some reason deciding to exhaust all the child's rice. The content in this ending is not quite as much as the other, you know, not containing a secret boss and all. But killing the snake was quite cool, and to be honest, I probably prefer this one. Now you may proceed till the end of the game as normal. Kuro pointed you to the wedding cave at Mibu village, so you return there and offer the incense. After this odd cutscene, you walk upon a colorful and beautiful bridge. This was definitely a surprise for me, both since the bridge looked nothing like an arena and because we haven't had a boss in the beginning of an area so far. It was a very welcome surprise, however. You can't imagine how happy I was to fight this boss again with 3 notches this time. It goes without mention that the boss's model, her animations and the arena around her all look phenomenal. It's a very stark contrast to her previous version. The first phase is almost identical to the corrupted monk, though she obviously has less HP and a slower/smaller posture bar relative to your own, due to her having 3 entire notches. So deflecting here is very effective, and you almost never lose progress when you back down. She doesn't use the 5-hit whirlwind attack though, and she also does her perilous attacks way more often, especially her sweeping one. In the second phase, she disappears and summons 3 shadows like herself. They usually teleport behind you and do one of her non-perilous attacks. Their timings overlap in such a way so as to confuse the hell out of you. It's very hard to avoid, but you quickly grasp that you're supposed to use the trees in the arena to grapple in a circle. Implementing this mechanic into a fight is great, but it takes no skill and you just have to wait out the attacks. Otherwise, once she comes back, the moveset remains the same as phase 1. In phase 3, however, you find out that she's been infested with a centipede as well, as she promptly just goes insane. She starts being way more aggressive, her sweeping attacks are also way faster and more weirdly telegraphed. She also does this. It builds up terror very fast. It doesn't look hard to dodge, but can easily be confused with a sweeping attack while you're panicking. It's a genuinely scary attack for me, especially when you already have some curse build up but can't find the time to cure it safely. You might also try to strike back at the monk after a sweep attack if you fail to jump on her head, but she follows that up with the curse attack as well. She also continues her combo even if you jump on her head, which means you have to jump a little more to the right or left to avoid the overhead slash. Overall, this boss once again has an unbelievably good flow to it, but I think it will be very easy for most players this late in the game. You already know most of her moveset and have gotten way better at deflecting than last time in general, so you won't have much trouble with her. If you try hard, you can use snap seeds to get rid of the shadows. You can also just throw ash in her face and spam firecrackers every once in a while, completely skipping the third phase, though that was already present in the original. Afterwards, you walk out and gaze at this flooded palace. This color scheme is one I hoped we would somehow get in Sekiro, and it looks just as beautiful as I imagined it. The area is phenomenal. You immediately meet the flood enemies, which are my least favorite in the entire game. They are basically Sekiro's version of the enemy that stands next to you and inflicts a status. There is no attack to dodge or anything, you simply have to get to them fast enough. Just take a look at this clip where I immediately run towards it as soon as it sees me, yet I almost get cursed anyway. I call it a curse, but it's actually a debuff that handicaps you. If you get it near an enemy, you're dead. It also disables your resurrection. On the bright side, we have the cool lightning dogs, which sadly don't get to do their lightning attacks with you insta-killing them. I think they should have put less of them but amped up their HP and posture, as right now they're basically normal dogs, they immediately die. Another enemy you'll be finding lots of here are the Okami warriors. The katana varieties combos are some of the most unique in the game, especially the jumping one, which seems to go on forever until you fail to deflect one. They do have a perilous thrust that looks nothing like a thrust though. The halberd ones do as well, yes, I'm calling it a halberd. Their perilous attacks on the other hand are very unique. They do them 4 times in a row while still moving towards you, so if you fail to jump on them the first time, you'll get hit probably. The lightning ones on the other hand are super confusing. Their lightning attacks are significantly more delayed than almost any other in the game. I get it right like 1/3 of the time, compared to Genichiro where I got the hang of it immediately. I really like them though, and I think this is what lightning attacks should have been like for every enemy. An actual challenge with a big payoff, and not what I call a blessed attack. On the outside of the palace, hidden in a little corner is a Sakura bull. It's identical to the previous one, except its attacks deal damage to reflects unless you've applied Divine Confetti. The mini-boss only has 1 notch and is quite the fair fight, even though I still dislike the bulls personally. After walking upon the bridge, a giant carp emerges and almost eats you. I guess this level is all about jump scares. Keep the carp in mind though, he's important. Continuing, we get to explore the second palace, which is full of all the different okamis besides the lightning ones, including some that throw balls at you. I really like this part of the level. Many powerful enemies clumped up in one place, forcing you to utilize stealth to pick them off. You can usually get by with taking groups of enemies head on, as they're often weaker, but not these guys. I feel like there's something about their AI that encourages it. They're kind of oblivious. You can backstab one and, as long as you aren't literally in front of the other guy as he turns back, you can circle around and kill him too. Fighting multiples of them head on is still possible though. We also have another Shichiman warrior with a lightning enemy overlooking it, which is just... why? You find the asshole that hurled lightning at you when it tried to go into the water, and I love how the game just lets you have it at this point. They can't even deflect, you can slash at them indefinitely. Here you meet an old lady who somehow ended up on the roof of a flooded house. She asks you to open the door to the palace for her. So you dive into the depths of the lake, sneak past the carp, and make the final swim for it as it notices you at the last second, then arrive at the other end to open the door. Nothing that special lies behind it though. You fight some more lightning guys and that's pretty much it. although there is some kind of foreboding, menacing atmosphere as the lightning clashes from the sky and you climb upon the mountain. You then pray next to the petrified corpse of a woman and get transported to the Divine Realm. Here you encounter the old dragons of the tree. They are basically a terrible idea with an even worse execution. You have to get near them so they can attack you with trees. Then you grapple onto the trees and plunge on one of them, ripping him apart in a giant slash that kills all of the remaining ones. That's basically it. That's the whole fight. On top of that, the plunge gets very buggy at times. After killing them, you enter the second phase, the Divine Dragon. I find the idea of it interesting, but the execution still lacks. There are 5 trees you can grapple onto and one of them will be illuminated by lightning. If you step on it, you gain control of the lightning and can then send it flying at the dragon. The catch is, he's constantly swinging at you and giving you a hard time as you try to find an opening. That's what it's supposed to be. What it is he does a couple of incredibly predictable attacks before leaving you plenty of time to strike back. As his health goes down, the trees go away and he starts swinging rapidly and sending all kinds of overlapping attacks at you with no real pattern. A toned down version of this is what I would have loved throughout the fight. Having a horizontal attack come flying but also a diagonal one so you have to jump to the right, but maybe then he sends a vertical one to the right so you have to change direction in the air. I'm explaining it very poorly, I know, but I think most of you get what I mean. Some kind of bullet hell but still fair and interesting fight. The one we have on the other hand is simple, boring, easy, and ultimately the worst one in the game. Overall, I don't dislike this area. The theme and colors are absolutely beautiful. The corrupted monk is one of my favorite fights, so getting to fight her properly is great. Most of the enemies here are enjoyable to fight and the level design is still mostly good. However, the fact that the worst boss in the game and the worst enemies in the game are in this area, coupled with the fact that all of the other areas, enemies and bosses are as great as they are, is what makes this one easily the worst in Sekiro. After Abandoned Dungeon, of course. As you return to Ashina Castle, you realize that, once again, things have changed during your absence. Lord Ishin has succumbed to his illness and the central forces have taken the opportunity to attack the castle. You quickly embark in pursuit of Lord Kuro, who's allegedly escaped to Ashina Reservoir. As you make your way there, you notice that not much remains to see within the castle, save for a big group of fighting men. In the reservoir stands Watch, a noble spearman from the Oniwa bloodline, and his asshole buddy who does nothing to fairly contribute to the fight. No, really, if you tell me what you're seeing right now is fair play, then you are either crazy or haven't played the game at all. There is also a third guy here, lying on the ground. He's just there for show, but my target keeps switching to him and it's super annoying. If you somehow manage to kill the swordsman, or more likely backstab him, you get to fight the mini-boss for real. I won't repeat the same stuff, he's as great as last time, and I love how careful you have to be due to the smaller arena. You then make your way to the final destination. So, we're back exactly where we started, fighting at the same place with the same person. I'm glad they didn't waste this gorgeous arena on a tutorial fight. This battle against Genichiro is as far as I can tell identical to his last fate in the previous one, except he traded his lightning attack for a big sweep with the mortal blade. You can either move behind him or interrupt it with Ichimonji. You can even dash through it, though I find it safest to just run behind. However, rarely in this fight Genichiro will do his sweep attack, yet there won't be a red kanji and he won't take posture damage from head jumps. I haven't gone back to check if it can be deflected, so I'm not sure if it's a bug or a feature. Otherwise, you'll be pretty well acquainted with this phase at this point and it's quite simple for this late in the game anyway.
Sekiro.
Ishin the Sword Saint was the hardest boss for me in the whole game. I also think he's the best one. I feel very weird saying this since he was my least favorite for a very long time. Yes, it was because of the difficulty. Kind of. You see, most of the criticism I levied towards his design I still believe today, though I don't hold it against him as harshly as I did before, since I'm not raging on him as much. Here are some examples. During his first phase, you already notice that he sometimes stands without doing anything. Literally, just look at this clip. This looks very odd, but it's not detrimental just yet. I want you to keep it in mind though. Next is the thrust attack. In Sekiro, Mikiri will sometimes miss. That's usually fine when you end up behind the enemy. You clearly dashed around them rather than at them. It is still bad if it happens so very often though, which it does with Ishin. I'd say it's about half of the time, way more than any other enemy. However, you don't end up behind him all the time. You can actually end up inside his damn sword and still miss it. This leads me to believe that there's something inherently wrong with the timing of this attack and not that he does it from his left side. These are the only problems with this first phase. Otherwise, he's absolutely great. His posture goes down very fast, but that's given, seeing how often he attacks and how much you need to deflect. All of his combos are incredibly fun and engaging to memorize and time perfectly. Parrying his wind wave is one of the most satisfying things in the whole game, even though it's easy. It might be because of the way it knocks you back, then you quickly dash sideways to avoid the after effect. I can't say, it just is. Overall, this first phase is quite easy, seeing as it's 1/4 of the fight, yet still mostly engaging and fun, as long as it doesn't screw with you. At the beginning of phase 2, Ishin can bug out and do the double slicing attack before transforming. Thus, the sound effects and voice become off sync. It's also generally bad to have him surprise you like that when you expect to be safe. Ishin also pulls out a giant spear thingy and starts performing these powerful, dragged out attacks. I like them a lot, but he does lots of sweeping ones while mostly keeping his weapon close to the ground. The ground, where all the flowers are. I loved learning these attack patterns, but it can be incredibly hard when you can't see them. You'll most certainly have more fun if you fight him at the bridge. That's a good solution, but not a very reasonable one. If 90% of the arena is best when not used in the second phase, then why isn't this just a small room? Also, the only viable part of the arena is literally on the damn edge, where you may get pushed off, fall and die. Continuing, do you remember how he sometimes stands in one place without doing anything? Well, in this phase, not losing progress is vital, as deflecting his attacks is significantly more challenging. That's fine, just run up to him like with any other enemy and hit him until he deflects and strikes back, right? No, because you can get unlucky and have him begin an impossible to interrupt super fast attack the moment you start attacking. This doesn't happen that often, but still can. Phase 3 on the other hand is very easy, seeing as you can now deflect lightning back at him. I love how you have to be at the perfect place or else you won't reach him. This is the only change in this phase, yet it makes it easier than the first one. Those things being said, Ishin is a phenomenal fight that is a combination of everything you've learned so far. Thrust and sweeps, longer combos, lightning attacks, chip damage attacks, he has it all. A single combo of his in particular is one of my favorites in the game. The long one that ends with a thrust. You know which one. I love that, and how he sometimes varies it to be longer or shorter. Whereas other hard bosses usually have multiple challenging phases, he just has his second. After a couple of tries, Genichiro becomes a joke, and so does Ishin's first phase. His second remains pretty hard for me today, but like with any other boss, you are bound to either get lucky and have him do 3 thrust attacks in a row, or suddenly gain some godlike powers and beat him in 20 seconds. It happens with every fight once in a while, so you just have to keep trying. Even if you manage to get to the third phase, it's still possible that you struggle with depleting his posture and HP, but here you can take your time way longer by staying back and healing. That obviously wouldn't work in the second phase as his posture would go away, but it does here as you get to deflect lightning at him every 5 seconds. This boss is not that hard. Once I tried fighting him normally, I beat it on my 5th try. That's less compared to any boss in a Souls game or even Sekiro for that matter. But his gun is amazing, his weapons are amazing, his soundtrack is amazing, his execution is amazing, and he's my favorite boss in the game. After defeating him, you get to choose one of the 3 endings you completed. I won't play any of them as they're quite long, but you can take a look at them yourself. Upon officially completing your first Sekiro playthrough, you likely return to the hub in order to log out your character for now, like with any Souls game. but you find out that the sculptor is gone. Moreover, every idol in the Ashina Outskirts has been disabled, and the original path leading to it is gone, with nothing but a crimson red mark left in its place. Back in Ashina Castle, you spot this lone kite which you can fling upon and end up in the midst of another lively battle. Here you find lots of burned out, wounded warriors from different clans, which all beg for your help. This is definitely leading up to something big. You also get to fight Shikikichi of the Red Guard. More mini-bosses are always a plus in my book, though this guy is more unique than most. He sometimes applies fire to his weapon for a short while, which basically forces you to dodge him instead of deflect. I like that, but there are times where he does it literally 8 times in a fight, and sometimes never. He is also one of the rare enemies you can strip the armor off of to deal massive posture damage. Afterwards, the fire intensifies, you start spotting more and more claw marks along the path, then finally arrive at the sculptor's idol. Here in Gyobo Oni was arena rampages the demon of hatred. When it comes to fighting bosses for the first time, this is easily what you might call the weirdest feeling one in the game. You quickly discover that you cannot deflect his attacks, he still deals fire damage to you. You are supposed to dodge them in any way possible. This is somewhat of a foreign concept in Sekiro and it will take quite a while to get used to. Demon of Hatred remains incredibly difficult even after memorizing all of his attacks, due to the fact that dodging his leg stomps is so impossible, especially the very delayed one. I really think it's too much. Okay, you aren't actually supposed to dodge them, you can deflect or even block them for that matter. Just so you know, the delayed one I mentioned is literally 1 in 100 chance to dodge for me. It is not meant for that. Why my dumb ass assumed that I couldn't deflect it without trying, I can't say. It's totally my fault. When you start deflecting his stomps, he becomes one of the easiest bosses in the game. The strategy is basically staying under him and whacking him as much as possible. The biggest threat in the first phase that will prevent you from doing that is his double fireball throw. You will be running at him a lot and he can suddenly hurl them at you, leaving you almost no time to react. This is probably the only attack that will kill you often. Another dangerous one is the head stomp, which comes up both very rarely and very fast, so it can catch you totally off guard. It can be simply blocked though. Two similar ones are the pushing lunge and the grab, which doesn't actually grab you. They have almost no wind up and are also very rare. The final dangerous one is the left hand slam he does on its own, or sometimes as a finisher for combos. I love this attack, as you have to sidestep it in such a precise way. Then we have the giant body slam, which looks awesome but is impossible to get hit by unless something's blocking your way. I think they should have either A. made the attack faster and more sudden, B. removed the red kanji, or C. increase the range of the explosion, or even better, have the player be forced to time the grapple in a more specific way in order to avoid the damage. Any one combination of these could have worked as well. His drag charge is similar, great but too easy to avoid, and doesn't even yield any reward as you can't follow it up with anything. I don't think I've gotten hit by it after seeing it the first time, and I still get hit by all the normal enemies in the game all the time. Removing the danger indicator and making it faster could have worked here as well. On the contrary, one attack which is bullshit as far as I'm concerned is this swipe he does with his left hand. It's the combo where he swipes from his left, then his right, then a right foot stomp and then a kind of underhanded swipe. If you're in a very particular range when he starts doing it, there is absolutely no way you are not going to get hit by it. You can jump or sidestep through it, and deflecting, or even worse, blocking it, still deals damage. This isn't even that rare, even though I got no footage of it, as I make it a point to stay under him. Still, he will slip away from you at one point, so it will happen when you try to run back in. Also, grappling onto him often doesn't even result in an actual mid-air attack. The weapon just doesn't connect sometimes, no matter how perfectly you time it. It doesn't happen with any of the other bosses, so I think it's really a problem with this one in particular. The only changes in the second phase are that he now follows up the charge with a powerful fiery slam. You will inevitably take damage if you're near him when he does it, so you have to keep your distance. The hitboxes with the fire are weird, however, as you sometimes literally dip your feet in them before grappling. It's still a very great addition and makes it so the fight doesn't stop after the charge. He can also do the attack on its own sometimes, but very rarely. The other change is the spirit emblems that he sends flying at you. They deal a lot of damage, but as long as you keep running in circles, they can't hit you. It's way easier to avoid than something like the Shichiman warrior. Phase 3 gets a single extra attack, the giant triple spin which leaves a circle of flames. I love the idea, you're trapped in an even smaller arena with a terrifying demon. However, and I can't say this without seeming edgy, it's more like he's trapped in here with you, seeing as the whole point throughout the fight is to stay under him as much as you can. He does charge through it and then back again, which is supposed to be a surprise, and it is at first, but quickly becomes easy. Something like removing the danger indicator or the demon going silent, then always charging at a random delay and maybe even a different direction, would have been awesome. Ultimately, this boss is one of the easiest in the game for me, easier than Guardian Ape, both Owls, Lady Butterfly, both Ishins, the Monks, and probably as difficult as Genichiro. If you memorize his attacks, there's close to nothing that can actually kill you, they are all incredibly well telegraphed. Where Sekiro is usually about skill just as much as knowledge, this fight is purely about knowledge for me. It's either you can dodge because you know what he's about to do, or the opposite. He also gets staggered unbelievably fast and often, and removing it would have bettered the fight greatly in my opinion. It's possible that the boss just clicked for me for some reason. I've seen people say the same stuff about Ishin, that he's not that hard, and I can't even begin to comprehend it. Still, I think he is, if anything, too charitable when it comes to letting you heal. He is, however, still my third favorite boss in the game after Ishin and the Guardian Ape. He has my favorite soundtrack and my favorite visual design. He looks terrific. In fact, he might just be my favorite in any FromSoft game when it comes to visuals. They nailed it. The lore is also great, the line at the end clearly indicates that this is the sculptor after finally succumbing to Shura. Also, do you remember the idol that brought you here? I thought it was simply for convenience at first, which made me kind of disappointed, the fact that we just teleport here. However, they are called sculptors' idols after all, so I like to think that he somehow left this one there so you could get to him and stop him in time. It brings you to an arena where neither you nor him can run away. Finally, for every boss I'll usually look up the community's impressions, as it's entirely possible I missed something. And I was very shocked when I found out that lots of players hated this boss. Not hate as in the fight was incredibly hard but still good, like what the community thinks of Medira and Nameless King from Dark Souls 3 or Guardian Ape and Ishin from Sekiro. People actually thought the boss sucked. The main reason I understood was because he disregards everything you've been taught up until now. And that's actually one of my favorite things about this fight. He's an optional boss, hidden away from your final main objective. Most people will find him after finishing the game, after thinking they beat it, mastered it and know everything about it. And here comes this guy throwing it all out the window. And in a way, I don't even think he really does that. Mostly focusing his health rather than deflecting like you do with other bosses means that when you do deflect stuff like head bashes, stomps and pushes, his posture damage will stay completely. As you can see, I even beat him with posture and not health in the second phase here. Others have said that he somehow has terrible hitboxes, and I don't understand that complaint. On some attacks it feels like bullshit because they're impossible to dodge, but not necessarily because of the hitbox or even hit timing, it's just that they're so sudden and impossible to react to. Some people also get angry about the HP, and I think he's closer to having too little HP than too much. I genuinely can't begin to imagine the strategies people are using when fighting this boss, but the fact that some say stuff such as there are small openings for punishing him makes it clear that they're doing something wrong. The way I go about it might be a little riskier, sure, but I'm literally killing him almost throughout the whole fight. There are more attacks that you can hit him while he's performing than there are that you can't. He does deal a little too much damage though, I feel. The one which stands out in particular are the spirit emblems, which he sends out like 10 of, but one can kill you. Another complaint I definitely agree with is the camera. It's easily the worst one in the game and really up there in the FromSoft games I've played so far. Ultimately, this boss does feel very odd at first, but today he's one of my favorites, and I've never ever found him unfair. He's still fairly challenging, just not as much as the others. His attack patterns are simple and there isn't much keeping you back when it comes to execution. Finally, we should go back to that choice Owl gives you on top of Ashina Castle. 99% of people will choose to stay loyal to Kuro, but if you forsake him, this happens. Now you have to fight Emma of all people. Her fight is clearly very similar to Ishin the Sword Saint. She does the chip damage cross, the dashing slash attack, the 3-hit combo, and so on. She's way more relentless when it comes to healing, however. If she's close enough, she'll most likely do some kind of dashing attack the moment you heal, which is most of the time actually, since the arena is so small. The 4-hit combo is also one of the most unique ones in the game. In her last attack, you cross swords, and if you deflect it, you throw her off balance. If you don't, she throws you off balance, though there's no real punishment for it, and there should be. This is a one-phase fight that's also on the easier side, as long as you don't get too greedy with healing anyway, though it's a great choice seeing what comes after. Oh, and I have to mention how brutal Emma's execution is, it perfectly matches this ending. So you get to fight Ishin either way, and while this fight is not quite as good as the real deal, it comes damn close considering how early in the game it is. This battle is almost identical to the Sword Saint's first phase, though we have two new things. One is the grab attack. Emma has a similar one too, though neither stand out with anything really. Secondly, Ishin has a unique mechanic, whereas you cannot hit him if he is standing still, he dodges it and then does an attack of his own. I'm not sure if this was implemented to prevent some cheesing tactic or for balance relating to his posture, or just for the sake of making him a badass. It doesn't matter either way, since it won't prevent you from initiating the fight when he's just standing there and not doing anything. There's actually a third change in this fight, and it also happens to be my biggest problem with it, the thrust hitboxes. They are somehow worse than Ishin the Sword Saint, despite the attack being the exact same, and I'm sure of it. Here it's more like failing 2/3 of the time as opposed to half the time. Furthermore, it also happens with the other thrust, and pretty often in fact, at least 1/3 of the time, and I've never had it happen with the other Ishin. Phase 2 starts off with Ishin lighting the whole arena on fire, they're charging towards you at full speed. You have to look out for the fire as it bursts and deals damage around the time Ishin reaches you. When he does, he strikes once, then about a dozen times at the speed of light before striking again. It's a really unique and badass combo, and quite a scary one too since it deals chip damage. The other change here is the Ichimonji, which is now a double fire attack that almost always kills you if you don't sidestep it. It's a nightmare at first, but you quickly grasp that you are supposed to do and it becomes a blessing. It's basically free damage. I think it's too easy to dodge and should definitely have some kind of punishment if you dodge it too early, like Father Ao does with his overhead slash. Overall, this is an amazing fight and quite the hard one probably if you fought him before the Sword Saint. But Emma and Ishin Ashina are incredibly similar to the Sword Saint, yet also a dumbed down version of him. So the fact that 99% of people will fight these two after him is the reason I think they're too easy. You're likely to have almost perfected Ishin's combos at this point, and it only takes a couple of tries to master the new ones. After defeating them, you get an early ending in which you become Shura, whatever that means. I'll be honest, when seeing the other three endings I was mostly like, alright, that's cool, but I don't really care. With this one, I was staring shocked for the whole entirety of it. It's such a nice twist, and it's easily my favorite of the four. With its free Game of the Year update, Sekiro introduced a feature I've always longed for in Souls games, a rematch mode and a boss rush mode. Starting with the rematches, or as Sekiro calls them, reflections of strength. You get to experience a boss as many times as you want. They also have higher stats to match your own. While replaying Souls games has always been great, I've also wanted to experience just some bosses, without having to play through an entire video game, which takes a long damn time. I mean, I screwed up with the recording on 2 of the bosses in Sekiro. Imagine if I'd had to replay the whole game again to get footage. However, I think that the way the fights in these modes are reset is a little dumb. If you die, you wait out the loading screen, touch the idol, find the fight you just died on and select it, wait another loading screen and try again. This is not an in-game world feature, so it would have been nice if you could just choose to instantly respawn in the boss's arena once again. We also have Gauntlets of Strength, which are 3 quite difficult boss rush scenarios. The bosses just have significantly higher stats. You start off by fighting one, if you defeat it, you get to rest, then move on to the next one until you complete the challenge. If you fail, you are sent to the beginning, and you can practice on each of them within the Reflection of Strength, a simple one-on-one rematch. We have 3 scenarios, Severance, Divine Heir, and Shura, to match their respective teams. Each of them ends with not only an increased stats, but also a reworked version of a boss. I appreciate that you get to practice them through the reflections without having to beat them first. I didn't notice it at first and found it incredibly frustrating to have to make my way through the whole boss rush just to die instantly, seeing as I'm still learning. So realizing it was an option made me feel as if I'd gained something very important. Next, I will be commenting on each of the 3 gauntlets. For some context, in the Gauntlets you can use all of your consumables you currently have in your inventory, and excluding the items which grant you an extra life, they will still be there in the real world to be used again in the next Gauntlet. I chose not to do this and only use the Aqua Spirit Foil if I have it on the saved file, which is an infinite item, and pellets, of which I basically have an infinite supply of at this point. I don't think using stuff such as Divine Confetti would be cheating, I just chose not to do it. However, all bets are off as far as I'm concerned when it comes to firecracker spamming. I do it on lots of bosses here. Anyway, the first and arguably easiest gauntlet is the Divine Heir. It starts off with the Gyobo Oniwa fight. Easy enough, you might think. At this point you have the firecrackers and grappling hook attack, so that's why they bumped up his stats significantly. You can literally get one shot, especially if you get greedy and overconfident like I do. And that's fine by me, a challenging rematch with the tutorial boss. You'll be returning to this gauntlet a couple of times and the fight never became a chore for me. The next boss on the other hand, Lady Butterfly, is just ridiculous in this mode. Her first phase is nothing special at this part of the game, but you will notice just how fast her posture comes back and how quickly yours builds up. In this version of Lady Butterfly, in phase 2, you have to be more aggressive than almost any other fight in the whole game as far as I recall. Her posture is ridiculous, so everything that has to do with consistent attacking in the original fight is even more detrimental in this Gauntlet version. Some fights can drag out for 8+ minutes if she decides to summon her phantoms every 30 seconds, as her posture will almost surely completely reset, even if 1/3 of her health is missing. It's everything that's annoying about the original phase 2, but 10 times worse. You are meant to use the snap seeds here however, and I forgot about it. It's my fault really. The final boss is Inner Genichiro, and he's one of the coolest bosses in the game. The only real challenge in his first phase is the triple wind slash attack, which deals tremendous damage through block, and the smaller instant wind slash, it can be completely blocked. His posture meter here is so unbelievable that you have to use the firecrackers to damage his health. It's almost detrimental really. Screwing up doesn't actually happen that often, but when it does, you usually get half your HP bar wiped, or possibly stun locked into infinity and one shot by his bow flurry. In a way, deflecting is in and of itself screwing up, seeing as your entire posture feels, even if you deflect every single attack in his long ass combo. The second phase is identical to his usual second phase, but he still has the wind slashes, and the lightning attack is a little different. Yes, that's right, he deflects it back at you. This is easily the coolest mechanic in the game for me, and I wasn't even mad when I died to it the first time I tried the Gauntlet. It's just as surprising and confusing as seeing the original lightning, and I hate myself since I'll be repeating this so much in the Gauntlets, but it does make it feel like you're fighting him for the first time again. It's a great little twist on Genichiro, even if it isn't actually that hard. It took me about 4 tries I think. It's one of those that just clicks with you much like the original fight, and once you beat it in the practice tool, you can go straight to the Gauntlet and likely beat him there too. The only things you need to memorize are the timings of his wind slashes and the double lightning attack. The other stuff will come back naturally. The posture damage from deflect is still insane though, so you kind of have to learn that too. Deflecting a whole combo but missing the last attack can result in death from bulk and posture. This Gauntlet is the shortest in the game by a long shot, and yet it still took me 13 minutes for a successful run. While the final fight here is great, the other two are on the lower end of my favorites, even if they are still good. The Severance Gauntlet starts off with the Guardian Ape fight. It's quite fitting, seeing as not much has changed from last time. If you're good at the original fight, you're good at this one. Nothing will get in your way when it comes to posture recovery, unlike other fights in the Gauntlet, so it's simply a little longer. You have more damage and HP, he has more damage and HP. That's it. It's about as challenging as Gyobo in the last one, though way more interesting and always an uplifting start to the Gauntlet. Great Shinobi Owl on the other hand has been turned from a pretty challenging endurance fight into one which lasts 5 minutes if you do almost everything perfectly. Even if you mess up, you'll probably get one shot. It's like fighting Owl for the first time again, and I think it's done incredibly well, while still remaining challenging. The True Corrupted Monk on the other hand is much like the ape. It's not like fighting her for the first time again, but rather just fighting her again. Genichiro however is like Owl. It's as if I'm fighting him for the first time again. Which means it was easy, because I fought the original one, the inner one, the original way of Tomoe one, and also done multiple replays. It's probably faster to kill him normally than to spam firecrackers, to be honest. Inner Ishin is an amazing reenactment on the original. He wasn't as challenging as Ishin was at first, but that would be an unbelievable amount of difficulty today, seeing how bad I was back then. Here I believe I needed 10 to 15 tries before it clicked with me, and then it becomes easy, much like Inner Genichiro. There aren't many attacks to memorize, seeing as you have to grasp on almost all of them. A new attack in the first phase is this giant wind spin that ticks around him once, then again on the outside. Even if you deflect the initial one, you still get pushed back into the second. Your only option is to memorize the range and be close to it so as to dash in before the outside ticks and then hit Hishin. But you can't even strike him, he has already raised his sword by that point almost every single time. It's best to just run away in my opinion, seeing as he only does it once or twice the whole fight. I really don't like this attack and it seems unnecessary. Another new one is the ducking slash. It's so fast I can't even tell what it is. Anyway, he follows it up with a sweep. This attack is incredibly bullshit, seeing as Ishin's posture is very fast to regenerate. That means you need to be incredibly fast and never ever let him stand still. You need to keep attacking him, and usually if you strike back, he will cancel most of his normal attacks into blocks, which lets you safely juggle from deflecting him to hitting him until he's dead. With this attack however, it's literally like this. I deflect his skull combo, I then strike back, and before my sword is even halfway there, I'm already hit with the first attack, staggered and then hit. This attack is not part of any combo and comes out randomly without any indicator, so it's bullshit as far as I'm concerned. This is only in the first phase though. In the second, we have this crazy combo where he starts with a dashing sweep, then an underhand spear attack that you have to deflect in the air most of the time, which is so badass, and then either a thrust or one of his many wind attacks, which is so satisfying once you finally get their timing down. I do think they should have inflicted higher posture damage when deflected though, especially since you need some time to run back to him after getting knocked back by it. Much the same is the powerful spin one which he throws in during combos. He also has the double one which is really easy to sidestep or deflect if you want to, though you don't get anything out of it. Phase 3 is once again significantly easier than both the first and the second phase due to the lightning. At this point, I honestly think these attacks are too easy to make use of. No phase of a boss that has them is ever challenging in the slightest. Otherwise, this fight is incredible with how aggressive you have to be due to his inflated health and posture, though also careful at the same time because of his damage. I'm overusing this phase at this point, but I believe it's the intent with this fight, so yeah, it kind of does feel like fighting Ishin for the first time again, if only a little bit. I actually had to do this gauntlet 2 times, since I forgot to record it, but I did beat it first time when I came back, cause it's one of those that, if you beat it once, you can beat it every time. I'm not mad about it either, rather the opposite. I'm not gonna just go back to the gauntlet and do it again on my own, but I was kind of happy that I had to now, since it's so damn fun. I think that goes to show how well both Ishin and Now were executed in particular. This gauntlet is the longest one and also my favorite. The final unique gauntlet is the Shura one. It's unique in that you have to have defeated bosses unique to both choices made on top of Ashina Castle on the same save file, which means you have to play the game again on New Game Plus. Thus, the bosses in the gauntlet will have about the same HP as the ones on New Game Plus, seeing as the gauntlets don't scale with it. This is great, since a lot of balance issues would ensue with this particular one if it did. However, that means you will have more attack power and skills when fighting this gauntlet, even though it's on the same level as the previous two. It's a very weird choice in my opinion, and I think they should have allowed for some kind of cross-save database of bosses you've beaten, so you can fight any gauntlet on any save file. Anyway, the first 3 bosses here are Emma, Ashina, and the Demon of Hatred. I'm piling them together because they're identical to the real ones in health and damage relative to your own. There isn't an ounce of added difficulty, and I find that really disappointing. The intent behind Gauntlet is for them to feel as if you're fighting the boss for the first time after all. This is obviously because you're fighting them on New Game Plus with more attack power, since I had to fight the Remnant of Strength version of Demon of Hatred on New Game Plus stats so I could record it, and it was pretty damn hard, way harder than usual, and also this version. Inner Father is the third and final new boss in the game. A bunch of more changes have been made to the original compared to Genichiro and Ishin, so we might as well get started. First of all, we have the fact that he is significantly more aggressive here. I like that usually, but when it comes to Father's design in particular, it simply means more aimless hopping around than last time. And I don't know if this is related or not, but I found that he left himself open for vitality attacks so much more. You can literally spam left click and go past deflect in more than half the instances, and you'll end up managing to hit him. He also vanishes way more often here, most of the time after throwing the firecrackers or after finishing the long overhead slash. I really like it. Sometimes he also vanishes and reappears to slash at you twice. It's to make sure you aren't blindly spamming and instead paying attention to what he'll do next. which is great with all the free hits you can get. However, if he disappears, you can still slash the air once and then deflect immediately when he does appear, so it isn't that preventative. You don't have to attack cancel, which would guarantee your safety completely. Oh, and he also does the whirlwind combat art, which is cool as hell. Finally, the way he morphs into the owl and tries to drop on top of you is now very dangerous and can get you easily. As far as I can tell, it's perhaps faster or maybe even different altogether, though it's definitely better than last time. One of the changes in phase 2 is the flame attack is now actually hard to dodge. You need to either jump or sidestep depending on how the owl comes flying. It's surprisingly hard and makes that huge Mikiri counter a deserving reward rather than free posture damage like before. You can simply tank it with the vertical one however, and that definitely isn't good. Owl also does a cool teleporting combo thingy. It's not that hard to deflect, though each hit deals tons of posture damage. Ultimately, the only reasons I dislike this boss are: A. I don't think his changes are that significant. Genichiro's and Ishin's combined have less than Owl I believe, yet they're both better. And B. I thought it was too easy. You're fighting the boss for the third time now, and even though there are a good number of changes, they're still incredibly easy to adapt to. I have to mention that, at his best, Inner Father can be very fun to fight. Yet unfortunately, the flow of the fight gets somewhat screwed up by all the leaping around and weird vitality damage opportunities you get in between his attacks, and it turns the fight very disoriented instead. The Shura Gauntlet is overall my least favorite. The Divine Air one has Gyobo and Lady Butterfly, which are not my favorite bosses either, but they are a big up in challenge compared to the original, whereas in the Shura one, the bosses are almost identical. Genichiro is also great, yet Ao is just good. Same with Ishin, whose Gauntlet has most of my favorite bosses too, as I said. When it comes to the Gauntlets as a whole, I think they're mostly well executed, and the idea in particular is amazing. I like to think the developers were tired of sitting in the shower while coming up with ideas and spins on bosses already published in games, so they just went, fuck it, let's redo the boss fight. The skins you unlock for beating the Gauntlets were likely similar, cool designs they never got to use. Either way, I really hope we get a similar boss rush mode in the FromSoft games to come. But there is actually a fourth Gauntlet left. The Mortal Journey one, which has every single boss in the game. The ultimate challenge. I love it. By the way, I didn't record it since I can't fathom how frustrating dying in the Gauntlet because of lag would be, and also because I don't need 30 more gigabytes of damn Sekiro footage I'm not even going to use. Yes, that is exactly how much it would have been, by the way. Anyway, firstly, I should get the obvious thing out of the way, which is that the Divine Dragon is not here, which is great. It goes to show that FromSoft themselves know it wasn't a great fight. However, we also have the Headless Ape fight, which is complete cancer to me and I don't think we need it. Next, I have to tell you that this Gauntlet is one of the most stressful things I've ever done in a video game. It wasn't actually that hard. I tried it once, died on the Headless Ape and went to practice. I tried again, died on Inner Genichiro, practiced until I could beat him 2 times in a row, same with Inner Ishin and Inner Father. Then finally tried a 3rd time and succeeded. But it was still incredibly stressful. I'm someone that likely gets anxious and frustrated more than most people, and I can't stomach playing a very difficult game for longer than, let's say, 3 hours at a time. Obviously, if I'm doing good and not dying much, that doesn't apply, but that's unlikely to be the case if I'm doing something for the first time. This Gauntlet took me 1.5 hours of constant sword slashing and getting slashed at before I completed it. That's 2 runs of getting to the final 3 bosses, which are mostly the real challenge here, and dying before I can't physically bear it anymore. I had to take breaks, like going to lay down or wash my face because it was so anxiety inducing. But hell did it also cause me to get really good. I'm talking about decimating Inner Father's first phase without taking a single hit and such. It's not that impressive, but no other challenge in the game forced me to get good this much. This Mortal Journey is an emotional roller coaster, and I think the perfect way for any player to end their Sekiro journey. The final fight with Ishin is unbelievably exhilarating. Every single Mikiri, lightning, and even each deflect has never felt so good, and so hasn't the final execution. You don't get anything for beating it, by the way, and I think that's perfect. That idea and what I'm about to say do sound cheesy, but only to those who haven't gotten around to beating it yet. It will probably be the best you'll ever feel in Sekiro, and it proves that the journey is more important than the reward. And that was the Sekiro video. The length got kind of out of hand, I know, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. I've been playing, watching and reading/researching a shit ton about Sekiro in the past couple of weeks, and it's made me both love the game that much more and also really wish to put it down for quite a while. When it comes to future videos, I don't have anything in particular in mind, but I do plan on soon revisiting Disco Elysium, Divinity Original Sin 2 and Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. I'm also playing a lot of Into the Breach, so I'll probably make a video about that. I'll for sure make videos on all 3 of the games I mentioned too eventually, though I obviously have to choose one for now, unless something else comes to mind. As always, subscribe if you like this type of content and want to see more of it. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you in the next video.